Adult Storytime Publishing presents Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up, Season 1, Episode 1, Son of a Preacher Man. Written by J.S. Thompson. ISBN number 978-1-961156-05-0. Copyright 2023. J.S. Thompson and Adult Storytime Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictionally to be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, organizations, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Season 1 of Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up is for Lona Celeste Harris, 1937 to 2010. We did it, Grandma! Act 1. The Red River County Fair was the pinnacle of summer in Fargo, North Dakota. An entire week where the whole city is all but shut down for the sake of fighting through crowds to overindulge in unnecessarily fried foods and expensive cheap beer. The classic car show and robust scenery of butter sculptures and rotund hogs at the 4-H exhibit drew in the masses as well. As 1985's version of the county fair was ending, bittersweet reality shifted. The adults had to act like grown-ups again, and all of the soon-to-be freshmen at North Dakota State had to start growing up and learn how to be adults. Amid the last hurrah energy pulsating throughout the fair-going Fargonauts on that climactic final Saturday, sat one young co-ed named Kerry Panneli. Sticky and sweating in an out-of-order cotton candy booth, Kerry was desperate for the fair to end. Kerry Panneli was a farmer preacher's daughter from Caledonia, Wisconsin. Kerry's upbringing was simple, structured, and sheltered. Her life on the farm was God, family, chorin', then school, in that order. If she had any free time, her father felt that time should be spent either praying or helping somebody that doesn't have enough free time of their own. Having fun ain't gonna get you any closer to heaven was his favorite mantra. Kerry had never ventured anywhere outside the radius of being known as Pastor John's daughter before. College was the perfect opportunity for Kerry to drop that moniker. She was starting as a freshman at NDSU on the coming Monday. However, she left home early for a job at the county fair to earn a few extra bucks, as well as an extra week of freedom. As happy as early freedom made her, by Saturday, Kerry was over being relegated to a tiny box, spinning sugar and watching people love the lives they were living. As the 5 o'clock sun rays pierced through Kerry's plexiglass cage, she sat sweltering and annoyed, waiting both for her shift to end and for someone to come and fix the GD broken cotton candy machine. The concessions captain, Gary, entered through the back of the booth to deliver Kerry an update. "Well, young lady, I've got some good news and some bad news. Which would you like first? Bad, I guess?" Kerry replied exhaustedly as she sat slouched, wiping sweat from her brow. Gary sighed as he looked down at the floor. "We're still trying to track someone down to fix the machine. I knew I should have taken that class. It's just, life happened. The wife was—" "And the good news is," Kerry interrupted, "we aren't going to let a little setback stop this locomotive. We're going to stay open until it's all fixed." Kerry sat there, moist and defeated. Her blood began to boil. The stupid fucking grin on Gary's face was genuine, but still infuriating to look at because Kerry saw nothing to smile about inside that booth. "The show must go on. Perseverance through adversity is what shapes who we become after we weather the storm," Gary added. Gary obviously took his job very seriously. He continued to pontificate about how concessions were the nucleus of the entire fair, how 10 years ago he started right here in this cotton candy booth, and within the next 10 years he'll be running the whole show. Gary continued on about how the life lessons she'll obtain in her booth will be much more valuable than a few extra hours of freedom will ever be. Kerry was taught to always be reserved, and to refrain from having an opinion outside of what the good book says. Her outward demeanor may have been sweet and submissive, but her inner voice was very sarcastic and jaded. Not many people shared her sense of humor back home. However, she was the funniest person in her own brain, so in her own brain is where she preferred to be. Going to college in a new city where nobody knew her was Kerry's opportunity to let that inner voice speak. Her first chance to do that was wearing a manila short-sleeve button-up and staring at her through Coke bottle bifocals. Kerry stared back at the mini donut crumbs stuck in the mahogany steel wool covering Gary's upper lip, fantasizing about how good it would feel to punch him in it. She stopped listening to Gary talk at her and was ready to stop pretending to listen as well. Kerry's eyes grew large. She inhaled a deep breath and paused, poised as if she had been frozen mid-sentence. "Nobody gives a shit, Gary, and neither should you. Not this much. It is the last day of an event that happens for a week, once a year, and you're hanging your hat on a 10-year ascension up Carnival Mountain to become fucking Captain Cotton Candy? I mean, do you sit around for 51 weeks a year just waiting to matter? I know you want to impress whoever's in charge so you can fulfill your sad little carny dreams, but come on, dude. For what? There is no cotton candy. Look around you, Gary. It's the last day. Everything else is gone too. We have Mars bars and Pepsi free, which is a funny coincidence. Do you want to know why that is? It's because just like you, nobody likes them." Kerry nearly spoke her thoughts in that moment. She felt sorry for him, because it was the only dream he had. Kerry just nodded, agreed, and swallowed her frustrations. Gary continued about his rounds, and Kerry sat dismally listening to the clock tick slowly. She leaned her elbows against the counter, head resting in her palms, and thought about how the first week of her new life was nothing like she dreamt it would be. A large silhouette interrupted Kerry's wallowing gaze toward the summer sun. She assumed it was yet another cotton candy enthusiast she was going to disappoint. Just as she fixed her mouth to politely inform the mysterious fairgoer to fuck off, a gentleman drew close enough to see. What appeared to Kerry was a 6'4" dreamboat in a neon yellow mesh football jersey full of ambiguously brown-skinned muscles. His name was Marty Christophers. "May I have 2 cotton candies, please?" Marty asked, approaching the window. "Huh?" Kerry asked, both irritated and enamored simultaneously. 2 cotton candy," Marty replied. "Hungry?" Kerry responded sarcastically. Marty nonchalantly leaned on his elbow, shot Kerry a debonair stare, winked, and let her know that the second cotton candy would be for her. Kerry felt an oddly familiar and powerful connection to Marty, a feeling she had yet to share with anyone. When they locked eyes for the first time, it felt as if their souls had been holding hands forever. After only speaking 2 words to him, Kerry felt she could tell Marty anything. Now, what makes you believe that the cotton candy girl at the fair is sitting around waiting for some Adonis to not only come sweep her off her feet, but to do so with the gift of something she currently, as luck would have it, is already covered in? Kerry rebutted. Unfazed and no less confident, Marty smiled and looked down for a moment. "The only thing I heard you say just now was that you think I'm an Adonis." Kerry let out a reluctant chuckle. "Huh, well, you can't have any cotton candy even if I wanted some. The machine's broken." "You could have led with that," Marty said with shrugged shoulders and a vexed look on his face. "Maybe put up a sign or something. Why are you even here?" "You mean besides waiting patiently for Prince Charming to rescue me from Cotton Candy Castle?" Kerry said with a smirk. "I'm here because we have Mars bars and Pepsi free." Kerry's resting face was very stoic. She spoke in a droll, sarcastic tone while pointing out her limited sundry like an apathetic Vanna White. Marty had not stopped smiling since he walked up to Kerry's booth. He became increasingly infatuated with every pithy word that came spilling out of her mouth. Most of the girls Marty talked to didn't have much to say back besides, "Totally," in between smacks of fruit stripe. Marty was entering senior year at NDSU as the quarterback and captain of the football team. He led the Thundering Herd to 2 conference championships and 3 consecutive title game appearances. Marty played basketball and ran track as well. However, not one of those activities put a tingle in his dingle. Marty's father, a reverend at Lake Forest Baptist Church in northern Illinois, envisioned his son's future by his side on the pulpit. Marty didn't have a distant vision of his life beyond one day having the freedom to do the opposite of his father's wishes. Football was a ticket out of his hometown and a free ride while he figured out where he wanted to go. Marty played basketball because Fargo was a hockey town and the basketball team was terrible. His size, hue, and mediocre ball skills made Marty the go-to guy on a team where very few fans came to watch play and which no one expected to win. Running track was a mandatory request for Marty's football coach to keep him in shape and out of trouble in the off-season. Marty's true passion was in the theater. Despite it being his field of study, Marty had little time to star in any school productions because of his athletic commitments. The closest he came to acting was modeling clothes for Woolworths and print ads and runway shows at the West Acres Mall. Pretending to love his life in Levi's was no Shakespeare in the Park, but the money he made doing it kept the convertible he was restoring in his free time in pristine condition. Marty was a walking, talking resume for a small-town Mr. Everything. He possessed the confidence, swagger, and smile of a young Billy D. Williams and Burt Reynolds combined. Marty was so quick to the joke it didn't matter if it was funny or not. He had an air about him that made you want to believe in him, with an aloofness that made you want to believe he didn't realize it. He was a blast at parties and the apple of every girl's eye on campus. The sepia tones in his iris were beguiling to the doe-eyed stares lost in their gaze. He liked talking to pretty girls, but he loved it when they spoke back. He appreciated how little effort it took to get laid, but afterwards, he'd lose interest faster than the flavor left the gum they were chewing. Pepsi-free is ridiculous. It'll never last, Marty scolded. What about Mars bars? Kerry asked. What about them? I wasn't going to get into it, but Mars bars are nothing but a janky Milky Way. Milky Way is a horrible candy bar that never deserved to be replicated in the first place. You don't copy off the dumb kid in class, Marty said. Is that so? I feel some hostility in your voice. Were you hurt by a Milky Way? Show me on this Mars bar where the Milky Way touched you. Not so much hurt. Definitely let down, though. There is no balance. It's just too much nougat without crunch. At least Milky Way is consistent. Mars bars are different in damn near every country you go to, Marty said. So, you've traveled the globe sampling exotic Mars bars? Asked Kerry. No, but an old GI told me that once when I was young. All I know is that if I'm having a bad day in a worse place, I need a candy bar I can depend on to make me feel better. I can't be bothered with guessing games when the stakes are that high, Marty said. I don't understand how you can care so much about candy. Or why a child would be hanging out with old war vets, asked Kerry. My daddy is a preacher and was always trying to fix wayward souls wherever we went. You meet some interesting cats along the way, Marty explained. Kerry was pleasantly surprised by the coincidence. They shared a few moments of commiseration, but forged a true connection while losing track of time through silly and nonsensical banter. Kerry's replacement was running late, and a line had started to form behind Marty. Neither seemed to notice. The two of them could have stood there, ignoring the rest of the world together all evening long. Kerry was finally relieved of her duties by Gary, who proudly martyred a sacrifice in place of the no-show evening crew. The first thing Marty noticed as Kerry walked out of the booth was her firm, yet ample farm girl ass cheeks, spilling just slightly out the bottom of her homemade Daisy Dukes. She trimmed the legs of her work jeans to just past the pockets. It was her first act as an independent college woman. Marty walked Kerry toward the security tent where her bicycle was parked. They held hands and meandered as slowly as possible without standing still to savor every moment of the short jaunt. Kerry's eyes were emerald and intoxicating, but hidden from the sun with her roommate's Esprit visor. Just a glimpse of them through a squint when Kerry looked up and smirked at Marty was enough to make him forget how to breathe. They lingered a little while longer after arriving at Kerry's red Schwinn. They wore half smiles and shifted their gaze between each other's eyes and the ground around their feet. Thanks for walking me to my bicycle, Marty, Kerry said. You streets are dangerous out here, Marty smiled. The only thing dangerous around here is you, Mr. Christophers, she said playfully. You have no idea, little girl. I'd like to find out, said Kerry. Kerry fumbled with her bike lock while she waited for Marty to respond. The few seconds Marty took to hesitate and chuckle felt like an eternity. Her mind raced. Did that make me sound like a harlot? I'd like to find out. Ha! Who do you think you are, Kerrigan Marie Panneli? Who does he think he is, taking so long to ask me out? At least ask for my number. Is he going to try and kiss me goodbye? I should make him work for it, but damn if I don't want that man to jump my bones. I mean kiss me. I mean walk me home. Yeah, man. Just stand there looking gorgeous, not saying anything. Ugh. So I guess I'll see you around campus then? Asked Kerry. Well, we won today, so we're partying at my place tonight, said Marty. We could do that if you want. You pre-planned a victory party? What if you lost? Kerry asked. Some dance to remember, some dance to forget. Party's a party, right? He asked. Well, when you sell it like that, how could a girl say no? "Shall we go right now?" asked Kerry. "You don't want to go right now. There's no one there but my roommates doing keg stands. Everyone will start showing up after Black Betty and the Ramble Lambs play the grandstand." "A Ram Jam cover band?" Kerry asked. "Yeah, they're big here for some reason." "Okay, that's perfect. It'll give me time to shower off the sugar and regret from the last week of my life. What dorm do you live in?" "I live in a house over on 12th Street. I can pick you up and drive you there," Marty said. "Isn't that where all the frat houses are?" "Are you a frat boy, Marty?" Kerry asked with a distaste in her mouth. "It's the football house. It's kind of rowdy at times, but it beats bunk beds in an RA with a switch up his ass," said Marty. "Must be nice to have that option, Mr. Football Star," said Kerry. "I don't just go riding around in cars with boys I don't know. I'm a pastor's daughter, after all." She smiled, winked, and straddled her bike proudly like a Southern debutante as she said this. "I'm not just some boy. I'm the son of a preacher man," said Marty. "I know that being a pastor's daughter didn't stop you from putting those shorts on this morning. Something tells me you like not to think so much about what your daddy says. Also, I'm going to pick you up in a pretty rad car. My caddy took third in the car show earlier." "Wow, Billy Ray, third," she replied facetiously. "Way to squeeze that little fun fact in the mix." "Aren't you impressed?" Marty asked. "Maybe if you'd taken first." Kerry began to pedal off as she told Marty to pick her up at 8 o'clock. Marty shouted back as she shrunk into the horizon. "Wait, how am I supposed to find you? I don't know where you live." She shouted back. "It's a small campus. Use your third-place Cadillac to find me." She blew Marty a kiss and waved goodbye, nearly crashing her bike as she tried to stay cool turning around. Act 2. Marty couldn't shake the moments he shared with Kerry, nor did he want to. Although his quest for love seemed impossible, Marty both welcomed and rose to the challenge. On campus or at road games, Marty fucked with little effort. He didn't leave the house each morning with the intention to sleep with every girl he talked to, but he was open to the idea with most of them. Marty was about connection rather than conquest. He never premeditated a plan to swoon a girl before. Marty picked up his buddy Roger for reinforcements. Roger Mikowski was a shy calculus major that kept stats for the football team. He was present at every practice and every game, charting success percentages far more in depth than anyone ever asked him to. Roger was practically invisible to the team unless he was getting picked on or standing at Marty's side. They became friends after Marty started sitting next to him in the front of the team bus to avoid the pre-game pussy powwow the rest of the team would have, bragging about all the sex they weren't having. Marty tossed his keys to Roger as he approached the car. "I need you to take the wheel on this one, buddy. You ready?" he asked as he began climbing up the trunk. "You're trusting me to drive Jezebel? I don't know, man. My dad's Yugo was already dented to shit when he gave it to me. A third-place Cadillac is too much pressure." "Why are you climbing on the roof?" Roger asked. "Because I don't know where this broad lives," Marty said. "When we drive around looking, she has to be able to see me in case I don't see her first." "That's crazy. No way," said Roger. "You're going to fall through the soft top if not completely off the side." "I've got great balance," said Marty. "Look, I can just straddle the sides like this. Just drive slowly." "Can't we just let the top down?" "Stand on the seat if you must be so reckless," said Roger. "I'm already up here. You got this. I trust you, Raj. Just don't fuck it up," Marty said with a wink. Roger drove Marty around campus slowly while he stood balancing on the roof of the Eldorado. They blasted the song "Oh Sherry" by Steve Perry from the car speakers. Roger played and rewound the tape repeatedly while Marty shouted to the music from the top of his lungs, changing the song's namesake from Sherry to Kerry to bring it all home. An hour had passed before Kerry poked her head outside of her dorm room window. "Marty?" Kerry shouted, feeling both disgusted and flattered by the display she was witnessing. The car was about a half a block past her window before Marty figured out where his name was being called from. Quickly and carefully, Marty squatted down as far as he could to slap the windshield, signaling Roger to stop. Roger's mind hadn't been in the car since the third or fourth loop of the song. Startled, Roger slammed on the brakes, sending Marty stumbling, rolling down the hood of the car until he hit the pavement. He lied there in defeat, sprawled out like a starfish. Roger whipped the door open so quickly it bounced back and slammed on his legs. He ran to Marty's aid in hysteria to find him gently chuckling as he stared into the sky. "Well, we found her, Raj," Marty said sarcastically. "Marty, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Holy shit, if you're hurt and can't play, it'll be all my fault. I'm gonna get pulverized. Please tell me that you're okay," Roger pleaded. "Yeah, Raj, I'm fine. Relax. Now get lost." "Are you sure?" Roger asked. "Yes, I'm sure. I'll see you at the party." "Okay, Marty. You are still coming, right?" "Oh, I'll be coming, all right. I'll be at the party, too." "It is my house, isn't it?" "Yeah, well, are you guys coming right away? Or what time are you going to be back?" Roger asked. "Just go to the party, Raj," Marty said. "Who's going to be there for me to hang out with until you get there?" "Literally everyone we've known since freshman year. Nobody is going to tell you that you don't belong there, Roger. Schneider, Elk, and Gasparini like you just fine. We hang out almost every day. The Three Stooges are your friends. They only put up with me because you do," Roger said. "I don't put up with you, Roger. You're my boy. I dig your rock collection, but most people don't want to hear about that shit. That's all. When you get there and see them, speak. Say hello when you walk into the room. Don't just stand there and be awkward. Laugh when others do. Look, Raj, nothing is out there to get you, but I'm not always going to be around to protect you, you dig?" "Geez, okay, Dad. I'll go to the party," Roger said, nodding his head. He turned slowly to walk away, kicking pebbles down the pavement while he dragged his feet to Marty's house. "Hey, Raj!" Marty shouted. "Yeah, Marty?" "Thanks, pal." "Anything for you, buddy," Roger replied with a grin. Kerry approached the scene of the accident, trying her best to curtail laughter. Kerry asked with a half-hearted seriousness, "Are you hurt?" "A little, but it's mostly my pride, so it's fine," Marty said with confidence. "Something tells me you may have some pride to spare, so I think you'll be all right," Kerry said. She giggled and stroked his face, then helped Marty off the ground. "Thank you," said Marty, dusting himself off. "This may sting a little, though," Kerry said, pausing. "But you're a terrible singer. I mean, that was cute and all, but stick to football, kiddo." "Wow," Marty replied. "Tough crowd. Are you always talking shit, or do you just enjoy giving me the business in particular?" "I think it's just you, actually," said Kerry. "I can't talk this way at home, so I guess I'm catching up for lost time. I feel oddly comfortable enough with ripping you apart, and you strangely seem to enjoy it for some reason. So why stop now?" "Then don't. Just hop in the car and let's ride," said Marty. "I can be your tour guide and punching bag." "Ride?" Kerry asked. "In your third-place Cadillac? I thought we were going to a party." "What's the rush? The party isn't going anywhere. Allow me to squire a lady about town. Thou shalt witness all the cool shit." Kerry rolled her eyes aggressively. "What was that for?" Marty asked. "That was at your Shakespeare. And for thinking that there is cool shit in Fargo," she said with folded arms. "The lady doth protest too much. Ye have little faith." "Oh gosh. Well, come what come may, I guess," Kerry said, pretending she didn't enjoy his Shakespearean accent. Marty stood with wide eyes and his head cocked in disbelief. "Thou doth not have to be a theater kid to know Shakespeare, stupid," Kerry added. "Fair enough, but most don't care unless thou art a child of the theater," said Marty. "Well, as good luck would have it, here I am," Kerry said. "Let's go then. We can ride for as little or as long as you wish. Besides, you kind of owe me." "Oh, do I now?" Kerry asked. "Pretty much. How do you figure?" "Well, I did risk my life searching high and low to find you. I think that warrants a little one-on-one time," Marty said, smirking and moving his hands up and down like a tipping scale. "That's a tad dramatic, but okay, Slick. I'm game. But first, will you answer one question for me?" Kerry asked as Marty slowly escorted her to the passenger side door. "Shoot," said Marty. How many times have you done this whole car roof serenade to get girls before? Asked Kerry. 0. I saw it in Teen Wolf, Marty assured her. He shut Kerry's door and did a courtesy jog around the front of the car to get in on the driver's side. Marty sat basking in the roar of his baby's V8 as he turned the ignition key. Eyes closed, he could still feel Kerry staring at him, poised with a follow-up question. May I ask who you saw Teen Wolf with? Kerry asked. No, you may not, Marty said abruptly. You said you only had one question. 2 questions are really going to cost you. Just what, pray tell, is the cost of a second question, sir? Kerry asked. Marty gripped the wheel with both hands, revved the engine, and bobbed his eyebrows at her. Dork, let's go before I change my mind, Kerry said as they peeled off. Act 3. 3 hours of driving later, Kerry and Marty had seen almost nothing, yet shared almost everything about themselves. They wasted not one moment of their time together contemplating what to say next. They could speak freely to one another. The foreign concept of being listened to without judgment was a liberating experience. They could laugh and riff off one another in between much deeper interpersonal connections, silky segues back and forth with jazzy, unrefined precision. Comedic chemistry between them was palpable. Even when they were bullshitting, none of it was bullshit. The only sight Marty took Kerry to see was the last stop of the evening. They pulled up to a lookout point in a town about 10 minutes' drive away from campus. A popular destination for young adults and teenagers without privacy to get lucky. That night, the vista was empty because of the fair, which meant it belonged to them. They lay together under a blanket of constellations on the hood of Marty's baby blue Eldorado. It was still lukewarm from the long drive. The crisp air whispering secrets through the surrounding elm trees balanced the heat radiating beneath them. Kerry rested her head on Marty's prodigious chest. The sound of his mellow, methodic heartbeat pulsated straight through Kerry's ear and into her soul. They shared heartbeats in a joint while they watched the moonlight bounce off the gentle ripples dancing across Lake Sakakawea in the distance. Kerry only hit the doobie once before letting Marty finish the job. She'd never smoked before. Besides, she was already high on the aroma of neighboring lilacs and the lingering scent of Drakkar Noir on Marty's hoodie. The purple haze was just a bonus. They excused themselves to kiss the sky, reconvening in a world all their own. One so high and far away from the others, it felt as if they would never land again. It was the first time they'd shut up since they met each other. They hadn't run out of words to speak. They just didn't need 'em anymore. The crickets courting each other, the owls preaching to the night sky, and the sound of silent, symbiotic synchronicity was a sweeter soliloquy than either of them could have uttered to surmise such a simpatico. The tender stroke of Marty's strong yet curiously soft fingers through her wavy auburn hair said all that Kerry needed to hear. Marty kissed Kerry gently on the crown of her head, breathing in the finesse shampoo wafting from her freshly washed hair. Kerry tilted her head back just slightly enough to make eye contact, staring over her brow with innocently mischievous bedroom eyes. Kerry closed them slowly as Marty's lips drew closer to hers. Their first kiss was gentle for an instant, then escalated rapidly to deep-faced French kissing, right before it graduated to passionate lovemaking. The heat radiating from their humping bodies was a beacon for an onslaught of eager mosquitoes. They lay post-coitally with their sweaty backs fused to the hood of Marty's Cadillac, oblivious to the fact they were being devoured. Those bloodsuckers may have had their way all night had it been not for the rustling sound in the nearby bushes. The disturbance was just enough to startle Marty and snap the state of shared euphoria. "Oh, shit! What was that?" asked Marty in slight panic. "What was what?" asked Kerry. "You didn't just hear that noise coming from over yonder?" "Yonder? Who are you, Mark Twain?" "I'll tell you who I'm not. I'm not the Yankee about to go check it out and get stabbed in the face by whatever's hiding in those bushes over there." Just then, a tiny red fox emerged from the brush. It scampered from its hiding place until stopping 10 feet in front of the car. "It's just a little old baby fox," assured Kerry. "Little old baby fox, my ass! That motherfucker's a wild animal." "Fox don't eat people, you girl," teased Kerry. "I'm not trying to get bit either," Marty said, defending himself. "You don't know what kind of day that fox had up to this moment. Look at him, sizing me up. He's got some frustrations he needs to let out." They heard a faint bark growing louder in the distance. "Did you hear that? That sounded like a goddamn wolf." Are you going to try and tell me wolves don't eat people either? Marty asked. The fox sauntered off. Shortly thereafter, a feral labradoodle passed through their foreground, chasing after the fox. Oh no! Look out for the big bad mangy puppy dog, Kerry teased. There wasn't much to do growing up besides watch the critters play. Nature is just a game, Marty. Those two were just passing through, playing tag like they would have been if we weren't here. We may have given the pup a chance to catch up by distracting the fox for a couple seconds, but other than that, their game has nothing to do with us. The expression on Marty's face was still uneasy and his body was rigid. It felt as if there was a hidden meaning in what she'd said. However, Marty's manhood would not allow him to admit there was no reason to be frightened. Marty, if you're still scared, why don't we just get in the car? Close up the ragtop and lock the doors tightly, asked Kerry. I ain't scared of nothing, declared Marty. But these mosquitoes are eating my black ass alive. Literally. Let's get back in the car. Okay, Marty, Kerry said, appeasing his masculinity. They gathered their clothing and retreated inside the car. Marty turned on the car and spun the volume knob on the radio down to a nearly inaudible level. Kerry slid across the bench seat to claim space in Marty's aloof yet tender embrace. I love that you said ragtop, by the way, said Marty. Kerry smiled and squeezed Marty a little tighter. You've got your work cut out for you, Marty Christophers. Oh, do I? Sure. If this is what a first date looks like with you, I can't even imagine what tomorrow will be like. Marty hesitated. His face wore a wince of impending doom. He regrettably exhaled and replied, Shit. What do you mean, shit? She asked. Shit as in... Shit, I already have plans for tomorrow, but the next day works? Or shit as in a cocky way, like, shit, girl, just wait and see. I mean shit as in... Oh, I don't know how to make it sound clever. I'm dropping out of school and skipping town in the morning, Marty said. You're what? But why? Classes haven't even started yet, Marty. That seems like the perfect time to quit, doesn't it? You're just going to drop a smoke bomb and leave without telling anyone? Asked Kerry. What about me? I opened my heart, my soul, and my flippin' legs to you, and now you're just going to hit the open road without saying a word? I'm sorry, said Marty. I wasn't keeping it from you. I just haven't thought about tomorrow since I caught a hankering for some cotton candy. I swear I didn't plan it this way. I don't need to share my life story to get some. This just sort of happened. This wasn't your first time, was it? Please. I've been to overnight church camp, Kerry said defensively. She was lying, of course. She'd heard stories of lost V-cards at Vacation Bible School, but with her parents running the camps, Kerry couldn't wander far enough away to lose track of her virginity. Huh, that's crazy. I lost my virginity at a choir competition in Minneapolis, said Marty. Why should I believe you? Asked Kerry. You probably made up the party, just to blow it off and get me out in the woods to fool around, didn't you? If I were lying to you all day, why would I stop now? Asked Marty. Why'd you pick me up in your third-place Cadillac if the party was only a couple blocks away? Asked Kerry. Again with the third-place business. You wouldn't tell me where you lived, remember? Marty said. You're the one who wanted to play hide-and-seek. The party is real, but truth be told, I wasn't trying to go. But it's your house. Why would you throw a party that you don't want to be a part of? Who are you, the Great Gatsby? Because if I went to the party, I would have to lie all night, said Marty. No one else knows I'm leaving, and if they did, they would only try and make me stay. I need to get out of this fucking town, but they love it and won't understand why I have to say goodbye. So I'm not going to. I'm going to drive off into the sunset. Wouldn't you be driving off into the sunrise? You're a little too late for the sunset. Sunset was the plan before this detour, said Marty. What are you running away from? Asked Kerry. Is everybody loving you too hard to handle? Nobody loves me here, said Marty, shaking his head. They love the feeling of winning football games. The name printed on the back of the jersey is irrelevant. When did you strike that epiphany? Asked Kerry. A little bit after we won today, said Marty. All the hands high-fiving me and patting me on the shoulder pads were attached to the same hicks that cursed my name and called for my expulsion after we lost the championship last year. I went undefeated for 3 seasons and won us 2 national championships. I made one mistake that happened to cost us a 3rd title, then suddenly I'm an affirmative action scholarship and stealing opportunities for more deserving prospects. It's bullshit. Then just quit the football team, said Kerry. Stay here, finish school, and date me. Maybe you can actually audition for a play, Mr. Actor. I'll lose my scholarship if I don't play, said Marty. It's kind of difficult to act in a school play if I'm not a student. There aren't many acting opportunities around here outside of the birthday clown at Hardee's. Believe me, that gig is not worth the free curly fries. Marty continued to ramble on. He stared out the passenger side window with existential longing. Kerry kept her gaze on him. To be honest, I don't even like sports that much, Marty said. Yeah, sure. I'm naturally gifted, I guess. But the real gift was having an excuse not to spend my nights waiting for choir practice to be done or follow my father to whatever broken home or rec center he was trying to fix. I got bigger, faster, and stronger. Rec sports led to high school athletics, which led to a scholarship offer. I accepted the first opportunity to get out of my house, which is how we are sitting here talking to one another. I take it you aren't going back to Lake Forest then? Asked Kerry. For what? Asked Marty, whipping his head back to Kerry's attention. So my dad can make me run a sports ministry for him in exchange for food and shelter? Fuck him. I'm tired of pretending to be who everyone else wants me to be. I'm going to Broadway to be a pro actor. That seems like a logical solution, Kerry said sarcastically. If all the world is a stage and we are merely players, what is the point? Aren't you just exchanging one role for another? Yeah. But for the first time in my life, I'll be in control of what role I'm playing, said Marty. If they turned my life into a play, I'd barely be a bit player in my own production. I'm going to be a leading man in my life, as well as on the stage. This time, I'm going to create my own character arc. I'll be damned if I'm going to live another day supporting someone else's storyline. I get that, I guess, Kerry said reluctantly. I put as many miles between me and my hometown as possible coming here. But what about our storyline? How serendipitous would it be if you met me right before you skipped town? Then we fall in love and live happily ever after. That would be sweet, and the way life ought to work. But what if it doesn't? Asked Marty. What if I martyr my dreams in the name of love and we break up in 2 weeks? Our story arcs crossed one another today, and I'm grateful for that. Tonight was amazing and unexpected, and that's the coolest shit about it. If I stay, we've got to be something to make it worth it. That's not fair to either one of us. This isn't some one-night fling to me. I think I might be in love with you, said Kerry. I maybe might be in love with you too, but neither one of us know that for sure, said Marty. I do know for sure that I can't stay here anymore. Who knows? Maybe the Big Apple won't be all that it's cracked up to be, and I'll come running back to our serendipity. We can write each other just in case life really is like the movies. Marty drove Kerry home, kissed her on the forehead, and said goodbye. Kerry held back her tears and wished him the best, then rushed out of the car and scurried up the walkway before Marty could see her cry. Marty sat parked outside of her dorm room window until he saw her lights turn on. Kerry looked out of her window to see Marty's third-place Cadillac driving off into the sunrise. Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up is an adult Storytime Publishing's production. Son of a Preacher Man was recorded in Enchanted Santa Fe at the Pelipan Portal Studios by J.S. Thompson. Written by J.S. Thompson, with special thank you to the editors, revisers, and advisors Robert Peach, Adam Herman, John Jason Phillips, and Kyle Schurz. Copyright 2023, Adult Storytime Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. Namaste, bitches. Adult Storytime Publishing presents Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up, Season 1, Episode 2, Broadway or Bust, by J.S. Thompson. ISBN number 978 J.S.Thompson-961156-06-7. Copyright 2023. J.S. Thompson and Adult Storytime Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictionally to be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, organizations, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Season 1 is for Lona Celeste Harris, 1937 to 2010. We did it, Grandma! Broadway or Bust, Act 1. Marty drove around town until he thought the party was over, planning to sneak in to get his stuff unnoticed. The hands of Marty's Swatch watch read 5 a.m. and the shindig was still in full effect. Luckily, everyone was so drunk they believed Marty when he told them he'd been there the whole night. He stuffed a hefty bag with a pile of dirty clothes, a ticket stub from the fair, his third-place car show trophy, and a Folgers can filled with the $582 he'd saved to start a new life with, declaring he was taking out the trash. He walked out the door for the last time. The moment felt as if it were moving in slow motion, profound in Marty's mind. Then Elk called Marty a gaylord for cleaning in the middle of a party. The only thing Marty knew for sure about New York was that it was the place where his dreams were waiting for him. He wasn't even sure how to get there. Marty hopped on I-94 and drove toward Lake Forest as if he were headed home for the holidays, and kept driving until the only thing in his rearview mirror were cornfields and a setting sun. The risk of running into someone who knew his father was too great to stop anywhere in Illinois. Marty prayed Reverend Christophers had never been to the Turnpike Travel Plaza just outside of Cleveland. After a good night's sleep and another whole day of driving, Marty made it to the Big Apple. It didn't take much time for him to realize that the now $412 he had left to start his new life wasn't going to get him very far, living in a $100 per night hotel room. Marty drove up and down Broadway, finally finding a space that he could call home until his big break came. Weeks passed, audition after audition, without so much as a moment of stage time. The intense competition of seasoned stage performers, even newly trained Juilliard graduates, hadn't entered into his calculations. Then, one afternoon, with his back pressed to the brick wall of the Palace Theater and sulking after an unsuccessful attempt to audition for Les Miserables, Marty was surprised by a voice. "Chin up, Kermit," the voice said with a chuckle. "I've been watching you out here. I know how hard you're working. You'll get your chance." "Kermit," Marty said, lifting his eyes from the pavement to see a man dressed in acid-wash jeans and a tight-fitting red leather jacket. The man stood with folded arms, shaking his head with a half-smile. "Sorry, dude. I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm new in town." Marty looked away, continuing to feel sorry for himself. "Well, that's obvious," said the man. "Sorry. That's just my humor. You'll get used to that. I called you Kermit because you're green. New to the game. You're all mopey like you aren't used to rejection yet. It ain't easy being green. Name's Travis. Travis Cosgrove. Thespian, barista, and proud gay man." "Oh, okay." "Marty Christophers," he said, extending his hand to shake Travis's. "I'm not gay, though. Just so you know. Not a problem that you are. I just don't want you to get the wrong idea." "Oh, thank you," Travis said sarcastically. "I'm so glad my lifestyle is okay with you. But you're not my type, Slick. Not to mention, your name makes you sound like a bumpkin. You're going to have to come up with something less hokey than Marty Christophers if you ever want to see your name on a marquee." "I've been where you seem to be before, that's all." Travis heaved a theatrical sigh. "It would have been helpful if when I applied for my union card, they would have told me rejection is a part of the deal. But they didn't." "What union do you keep talking about? And what do you mean I'm not your type?" "For one, I'm not into straight dudes anymore," said Travis. "I can easily tell that you're a raging hetero by your ability to somberly contemplate your life choices while simultaneously checking out every butt that passed your sightline. Secondly, I'm also very much in love with my partner, Terry, back in Queens. And third, but most importantly, what do you mean? What union am I talking about? Did you really believe you could get a second of stage time without paying dues? Boy, this city's going to eat you alive." Marty laughed. Something funny? Asked Travis. Queens, Marty chuckled. Never heard that one before, Travis said, tapping his foot. Are you going to try your hand at stand-up while you're at it? I hear the Cellar is looking for a nobody to headline this Saturday night. I won't be a nobody for long. You'll see, Marty declared. Where do I sign up for this union thing, and how much does it cost? I only have a couple $100 left to last me until I make it big. Please? I'll buy you lunch. Huh, child, Travis said, laughing. Save your money, honey. I'm happy to help you however I can. I'm a sucker for lost souls trying to find their way. I insist. We aren't going to the tavern on the green. There's a papaya dog down the block next to my spot. You have a spot on Broadway. No money, plans, or viable option to hold on to it, but you have a spot on Broadway, asked Travis. Just off Broadway, but close enough. What can I say? I got lucky, I guess. I know it won't last, but we'll see what happens, said Marty. The two of them walked down West 72nd Street towards Marty's car. Travis peppered him with pro tips to survive in the theater scene, as well as the big city as a whole. Travis had lived in New York his entire life. He and his mother moved from apartment to apartment throughout all 5 boroughs growing up while she struggled to make ends meet as a cabaret singer. Travis felt he knew everything there was to know about the city that never sleeps. Marty felt he already knew everything he needed to know about the entire world already, but appreciated Travis's confident kindness, so he listened politely until they reached Marty's Cadillac. Here she is. Casa de la Christophers, Marty said, presenting his vehicle/home. Ain't she purty? On the outside, sure, Travis said, peeking into the back window. But the inside is utter trash. Literally. No offense, of course. It's a little messy inside. I wasn't expecting company, Marty said through an awkward giggle. Company? When you said Papaya King was near your spot, I didn't imagine you meant a parking spot, said Travis. I thought you meant like, you know, hey, brother, come slide through my spot right fast. Marty shrugged his shoulders. 25 cents an hour in the meter is the cheapest rent in town. Hector, the guy who owns this bodega, lets me use the toilet whenever I want. All I have to do is buy a quarter water or a candy bar. I don't trust most of the food. It looks pretty old. I'm good with footlongs and pierogies anyways. What more could I ask for? How about a roof that isn't made of cloth? Travis chortled. Oh, honey, just wait till November. I thought I would be settled into something by now, if I'm being perfectly honest. But hey, that's the life of a starving artist, right? Gotta pay those dues, said Marty. You're going to be living the life of a frozen artist, Travis said. You can't live off of street food, and Hector is probably planning to sell your kidneys. You're going to come stay with me and my Terry, and I won't hear another word about it. After a moment, Marty gratefully accepted the offer. Shelter was nice, and having a return address to write on the cologne-stained envelopes that held the letters he'd been sending to Kerry back in Fargo was the best part of the deal. He'd taken great liberties in describing his success thus far, but Marty believed in himself so much that it didn't feel like lying. His nest egg dwindled quickly. He sold Jezebel to buy food, headshots, and to chip in for his space on the couch in Travis and Terry's junior one-bedroom apartment. Once Marty's Cadillac money ran out, Travis got him a job figure modeling for an art class at NYU. Nude modeling was never in Marty's game plan, but it was the only paying gig he could land close enough to show business to put on a resume. As time wore on, Marty's determination and faith in himself began to waver. Kerry still hadn't responded to any of his letters, and casting directors weren't responding to his unrefined acting chops. Despite his $1 million smile and bravado, Marty was deep down just a scared Midwestern boy, envisioning what life might have been like if he had stayed to just play football and be happy with the one that got away. Act 2. Kerry wasn't managing the distance any better than Marty was, although for different reasons. Rumors began to flood the NDSU campus regarding Marty's whereabouts and the reasons for his sudden disappearance. Thanks to Roger's rendition of Kerry's account, the school and cities surrounding it made her the scapegoat for the Thundering Herd's subpar season and the harlot who drove away their superstar. Ignoring dirty looks and blatant whispers took its toll on Kerry's mental health. She cared more about keeping up with her daytime soaps and what Victor was doing on Days of Our Lives than keeping up with her course load that semester. She wore the same dingy gray sweatpants and her roommate's old bleach-stained bum sweatshirt nearly every day to hide the weight she'd gained, and she avoided leaving her dorm room as often as possible. The one class Kerry enjoyed and made some effort to attend was Psychology 101. Her professor, Dr. Darlington, scheduled a review day for the upcoming final exam that Kerry didn't want to miss. She fought through her exhaustion and queasy stomach to make it on time to her 8 a.m. class that frigid December morning. Kerry may not have been tardy to class that day, but she wasn't present either. She took a seat in the back row of the lecture hall, tucked her arms into her puffy brown ski jacket, laid her head to rest on the desk until class started, then fell sound asleep before the professor had the chance to say good morning. Dr. Darlington allowed Kerry to remain in her uninterrupted slumber until class was dismissed and the lecture hall was empty. He sat, leaning back in his swivel chair with his feet propped up on his cluttered desk and hands clasped behind his head. He stared at Kerry above his glasses for 10 minutes, waiting on her to awaken naturally. Dr. Darlington eventually grew tired of this bit and cleared his throat with obnoxious gusto as he sat down at the desk beside her. Ahem! Dr. Darlington coughed thunderously from the desk chair. Don't worry about whose baby it is, Kerry exclaimed in a half-dream state. Who said anything about a baby, Miss Panneli? Asked Dr. Darlington. Sorry about that, Mr. Darlington, Kerry said in a daze. I must have been dreaming. It's Dr. Darlington, if you don't mind, he said. I was actually a practitioner of psychiatry for several years before teaching the field of psychology. I apologize if my vast wealth of knowledge was putting you to sleep. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Darlington, Kerry said with thinly veiled sarcasm. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I'm just going through a lot right now. I'm trying my best, okay? At least I made it to class today. And I always call you when I'm too sick to make it. It's quite all right, said Dr. Darlington. Although I've told you repeatedly, you don't need to let me know when you're choosing not to come to my class. You aren't in high school anymore. I would, however, like to chat with you since I have you. Do you have a minute? Do I have a choice? Asked Kerry. You're an adult, young lady, said Dr. Darlington. You have a choice in whatever you want to do. You're the one paying to be here. You could have chosen to stay home and sleep. Instead, you chose to do it in my lecture hall. I get a paycheck whether you show up or not. Is this about my grades? Asked Kerry. It was going to be, because I believe you are smarter than the effort you put forth. But I also believe that you know that already, said Dr. Darlington. I'd rather talk about that dream you were having. Oh, I see. Are you trying to Freud me right now? Asked Kerry with an air of confrontation. What do my dreams mean, Dr. D? I don't need to know how to interpret dreams to know morning sickness when I see it, he said. I'm on my second wife and third child. Crap, yelled Kerry. Well, if you're planning on calling my parents, don't bother. They already know. I thought I could at least keep it a secret here on campus for a little longer. Am I really showing that much through my fat clothes? Just when I thought the rumor mill was slowing down. Well, you can spare me the lecture, Doc. I'm sure it's the same one I get every time I call home. I know I fucked up. Young lady, I don't need to lecture you about anything except personality disorders. Parent-teacher conferences aren't in my job description, said Dr. Darlington. For what it's worth, your belly isn't showing through your fat clothes yet. Talks of you being pregnant with that Christophers boy's love child have been circulating since he went MIA. That doesn't make any sense, shouted Kerry. How could either one of us have possibly known that I was pregnant immediately after we made love? Are people around here so dumb they don't understand how the female body works? Rumors don't have to make sense, Dr. Darlington said. The human brain needs a solution to every problem you introduce to it. If it's a problem we don't want to think about too much, we accept the first solution that comes our way. We pass it along without processing the information and move on with our lives, and on to the next problem to solve. No lectures, huh? Said Kerry. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have an appointment with the back alley coat hanger to get to, or did you want my help? Dr. Darlington said bluntly. Dr. Darlington's crude reference to abortion shocked Kerry into silence. She gestured him to continue. Thank you. He paused for effect. I met my first wife, Betty, in college. Her friend Evelyn fell for my buddy Chuck, and the four of us were inseparable until Betty left us a few years after Terrence was born. She left you with the baby? Asked Kerry. Yes, ma'am, he said, crossing his arms. She said she felt called to be more than a Northwoods country bumpkin. It would have been nice of her to have said something before I built us our dream home in Londinium. She could have said something before giving birth to a son she left me to raise alone. She could have said something while I was busting my ass after graduation. Double shifts in a greasy diner after a full caseload during the day. I was a social worker at the time. I did all that for our dreams, and it still wasn't enough. "Where's Londinium?" asked Kerry. "It's about 2.5 hours north of the cities," said Dr. Darlington. "I pooled everything I had with Chuck's trust fund to buy the most beautiful plot of land. 5 little acres next to a shallow lake on the edge of town. I could see our whole future from the moment we stumbled upon it. Betty and I raising our family together in a house next door to Chuck and Evelyn with their kids. The giant chestnut oak tree in the middle of the property had treehouse written all over it." "I'm sorry, can I stop you for a minute?" Kerry interrupted. "What cities are you 2.5 hours away from? If I must listen to your story, you can at least paint a clear picture for me." "The Twin Cities?" Dr. Darlington said, perplexed. "Still drawing a blank," said Kerry. "Minneapolis and St. Paul." Kerry looked into the corner of the room while she processed her thoughts. "Oh, that's why they are the Minnesota Twins? Stupid. Anyways, that's super far away. You leave your wife and toddler all semester to teach freshman psych? I live in the RV that my current wife and I were supposed to travel the country in after I retired during the school week and go home on the weekends," said Dr. Darlington. "You do what you have to do. Where was I going? We built the dream house. Betty left. Lynn gave birth to May. That's right. Chuck was always on the road selling shower curtain rings, and I was a mess after Betty left. We were just there for each other. But, that's the 3rd pregnancy I was referring to. That's why I brought up Evelyn. Remember from earlier? 2 kids, 3 pregnancies? Gotcha. Not your kid." "I'm not even going to dignify that tone with a response," Dr. Darlington said defensively. "Where was I?" "Hopefully getting to the point," said Kerry. "I kind of have to pee. I am pregnant, you know." "Fine," he said. "The point is that life rarely works out the way you plan it. Evelyn died when May was 10. She's off to college now, so Chuck is shopping retirement villages in Boca. I started a successful psychiatry practice in the next town over and eventually fell in love with my secretary, Lori. We had planned to snowbird it during the wintertime in the Winnebago I mentioned earlier." "Then you had Gwendoline?" asked Kerry. "Then we had Gwendoline," Dr. Darlington said. 6 months into my retirement, my 47-year-old wife got pregnant. Biologically speaking, she should have been too old to conceive a child. Socially speaking, we were too old to consider any option but raising that child ourselves. Don't get me wrong, I love my daughter more than life itself. It's the one positive result of my marriage. I will never forget the moment I watched Gwendoline take her first breath. Nothing else mattered after her life became a reality." "It's not that I don't want kids," Kerry said. "One day, I just finished being a kid myself. It's not fair. I want to matter for a little while." "It's not fair at all," Dr. Darlington said. "You can do everything right and by the book and still get screwed. What would be even more unjust is for a child to be raised by someone who wishes they didn't hold the responsibility. I think you'll make a fine mother one day when you're ready, but for now, I can help you find one who is." Act 3. Pete John Michaelberry Panneli was born in the late evening of May 29, 1986. Kerry gave him the names of her father and uncles, a kiss on the forehead, then handed him over to the custody of the state. Kerry was certain whomever adopted her son would change his name, but they might keep one if she gave him enough of them. Until that day came, Pete was placed in the foster care of an elderly woman named Lona Walker. Lona was a retired kindergarten teacher and closet poet from Northern California. She'd been widowed 3 times before having the chance to give birth to a child of her own. Her first husband, Eldridge Walker, died during the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge, just a few months shy of completion. Lona followed her second husband, Lyle, a civil rights activist and member of the Black Panther Party, back to his hometown of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Lyle met his demise at the hands of the KKK. Lona settled down with her third husband, Stanley, in Fargo, until Stanley died of pneumonia in 1972. Lona gave up on romantic love and began fostering children the following year. Lona was 70 years old when she took custody of Pete. She didn't have the energy to keep up with maladjusted preteens anymore, and she felt that an infant would be fine in the short term. Pete lived with Lona until he was 4 years old. Over those 4 years, Pete and Lona became the best of friends. Lona was an avid TV watcher, and Pete did whatever Lona did. He was an intelligent yet easygoing and imaginative child who was always content with his surroundings so long as he had his Nona. They'd watch Lona's favorite sitcoms on Nick at Night before Pete went to bed. Their daytime routine would consist of The Today Show, then The Price is Right, which was followed by Forever Young, a soap opera about the intermingling love lives of doctors and patients in an amnesia ward. Lona loved her stories. Lona also loved her junk food. She and Pete made daily visits to the corner store for Reese's peanut butter cups, a brown bag full of penny candy, and a can of ice-cold Pepsi they'd share while stopping to watch the older children play at the playground on their way home. "Nona?" asked Pete. "Yes, Pookie?" "Can I have a peanut butter cup?" "I don't know. Can you?" asked Lona. Lona might have been a sucker for an adorably mispronounced word, but was a stickler when it came to proper grammar, even that of a 4-year-old. "May I have a peanut butter cup, pretty please?" asked Pete. "I've only got 2 of them. One for me and one for you." "They give you 2 of them because they're tasty enough for one person to eat both of them," said Lona. "I let you choose your treat, and you had the lady make you a goodie bag. That's way better than Reese's. You have all kinds of candy, Pete." Pete sifted through his candy bag. "Here, I'll give you 4 cherry balls for 1 cup." Lona looked down at Pete, sizing him up with discerning eyes. "Make it 5, and you've got a deal, I guess." "You drive a bargain, Nona," said Pete. "I drive a hard bargain, honey, and you better believe it. I've told you before, your Nona is a tough cookie. I've been around the block." She nudged Pete with her elbow and winked. "You're just lucky you're so cute." Pete negotiated the same deal every day. It became a game he loved to play as if it were the first time, every time. Lona was genuinely reluctant to relinquish one of her coveted peanut butter cups every day. However, the joy of watching Pete commit to the bit was far more satisfying. "I've been around the block too," Pete exclaimed. "We walk around the block together all the time." "We sure do, sweetie," said Lona with a giant smile. "We sure do." Their midday ritual broke the monotony between AM and PM television lineups. Pete and Lona didn't venture many places beyond church and the grocery store. Lona gathered all of her non-snack time grocery essentials every Thursday night with the Grocery Getters. It was a program the reverend of her church started in which he made the youth volunteer to help the elderly carry their groceries. Lona wasn't necessarily a religious person. She loved the energy that fueled gospel music, extracting her own message and inspiration from the sermons. She thought it was safer to believe in something than nothing at all. "Too old to sin properly anyways," as she'd often think to herself. A couple hours once a week inside of a church to ensure a comfy space for all of eternity was the bargain of a lifetime in her mind. Pete was too young for Sunday school, and there weren't enough kids his age to hold a daycare, so he sat with Lona through service, although he couldn't sit still for very long. The first lady of the church wouldn't get halfway through the first church announcement before Pete was under the pews, pretending to fix cars by pulling off the gum stuck to the bottoms. Once fixed, he enjoyed rolling up and down the aisles, unsuccessfully trying not to clip anyone's ankles. Some appreciated the comic relief amidst talks of eternal damnation and perpetual sacrifice. Others felt Pete lacked discipline and the rod had spared him too many times. They wore disgust for the toddler's blasphemy on their faces. Elder Caldwell, or God, according to Pete, would use that as an opportunity in his sermon to encourage the young adults to get married and start having children so that the young Lamb of God, as he called Pete, would have someone to play with. Reverend Caldwell's patience with Pete was due in large part to how sweet he was on Lona. A widower himself, all of the women older than 60 in the church were sweet on Elder Caldwell. One of those women, Sister Bennett, resented Lona for the Reverend's repeated clemency on Pete's childish spasticity. Clarice Bennett was the wind and the water of the congregation's gossip mill. She made it her business to let everyone know how little business Lona had raising a baby at her age. "Bye-bye, Sister Walker. I'll be praying for you two."
Bless you, Clarice," Lona said with a forced smile. "Bye, Reverend Caldwell. Thank you for the ride home." Pete, wave goodbye and say thank you to Reverend Caldwell, she added, looking past Sister Bennet. Oh, just doing the Lord's work, ma'am, Reverend Caldwell said modestly. Pete, you take good care of Miss Walker now, you hear me? I'll see you two on Thursday with the grocery getters, the Reverend added through an ear-to-ear grin. Sister Bennet shrugged and looked forward as the van pulled off. What is she going to pray for us for, Nona? Asked Pete, grabbing Lona's hand as they walked up the sidewalk. Nothing that's any of that old busybody's business, honey, said Lona. Let's go on inside. Andy Griffith is about to come on. Can we go to the park after? Asked Pete, apropos of nothing. Oh, I don't know, Petey, sweetie. Nona's pretty tired, said Lona. How about we go tomorrow instead? You can move dirt around all morning, she offered, referring to the toy excavator in the sandbox. I want to ride the slide. I definitely don't have the energy for that, Lona said. Good thing we're going in the morning then, huh, Nona? Said Pete. You get energy when you're sleeping. But what do you need energy for? All you have to do is sit and watch me. Not with all those hard-headed heathens running around and roughhousing like they do, said Lona. What if you get trampled or fall off the slide? If I let something happen to you, I don't know what I'd do. I'm 4 now, Nona. I can handle it. Oh, can you now? Asked Lona. Yep. You would be the only other Nona out there anyways, said Pete. If the other kids know how to slide alone, it can't be that hard, he continued. I'm the only Nona anywhere, boy, said Lona. No, like mommies. Nona is the same thing, said Pete. Nonas are a lot like mommies. Just a little older, I guess, said Lona, thinking on her feet. You're not my mommy, Nona? Pete asked with a big-eyed stare. Oh, shit, Lona thought to herself. Pete wore a look of puzzled devastation on his face. Lona dreaded this moment since Pete could speak well enough to ask questions. She'd hoped the subject wouldn't come up until they'd found a set of parents to take Pete home. Well, no, honey, I'm not. But I'm your Nona, she said. And you're my little pookie dookie Petey. That's all that matters as far as I'm concerned. Where's my mommy? Your mommy is still growing up, sweetie, said Lona. After little children grow up, they become mommies and daddies and make little children of their own. Sometimes little children try to grow up too fast, and they have a baby before they're all done growing up. That's why your mommy and daddy gave you to me. My mommy didn't want me? Pete grasped Lona's hand tightly and stopped walking. There was fear and confusion in his tearful eyes. Of course she did, said Lona. She wanted you to have the best life possible, but she knew she couldn't give that to you. A mommy and daddy's job is to love you, take care of you, and teach you how to be a grown-up one day. They can't do that if they're still children themselves. Will you teach me how to be a good grown-up since my mommy's still a kid? Asked Pete. I'll do you one better, Pete, said Lona. I'm going to allow you to be the best kid anyone ever made. You're going to get a new mommy and daddy one day. You let them worry about all that grown-up stuff, okay? You have your whole life to be a grown-up. The only thing you need to worry about is staying a little boy for as long as you can. How do I do that, Nona? Asked Pete. By using your imagination, Lona said. Today, let's pretend that we are in our favorite television programs. Then tonight, I will tell you your favorite story before we go night-night. Mr. Fat Man? Pete asked excitedly. Mr. Fat Man, confirmed Lona. Mr. Fat Man. One day, there was a big old fat man walking down the street, as big as a house. He came across a little girl playing hopscotch on the sidewalk. He shouted, Hey, little girl! Lona was a very animated storyteller. When she spoke for the fat man, she spoke in a slow, deep voice and wobbled side to side with bloated cheeks and flailing arms. Move out of my way! I'm too fat to go around you. The little girl looked up and said, Hey, fat man, how'd you get so fat? The fat man patted his belly and said, I ate a loaf of bread, I ate a dozen eggs, I drank a gallon of milk, I ate a stinky dog. You ate a dog? Asked the little girl as she started running away. Yep, I swallowed it whole. I'll eat you too if I catch you. The fat man catches the little girl and eats her. He continues to terrorize the neighborhood, listing everything he's eaten already before he devours another child. Pete's favorite part of the Fat Man's story was the finale. Lona used Pete's name in the story and made him the hero. After Mr. Fat Man ate a dog, a little girl, a police officer, a firefighter, and a couple little boys and their football, he waddled up to Pete. "I'm too fast for you, Fat Man. You'll never catch me," Pete said. "That's what they all said before I ate him. Come here, little boy." "Does Pete get away?" Pete asked as if he didn't already know. Well, the Fat Man chased Pete, and Pete ran. And he ran, and he ran. Pete ran so fast that he made the Fat Man trip and fall. The Fat Man landed on his belly and it busted wide open. And out came the little girl. And out came the stinky dog. And out came everyone that the Fat Man ate. All of the townspeople lifted Pete on their shoulders and shouted, "Hooray!" The end. "That was close," said Pete, looking up from his little spoon position in Lona's snuggle. "Good thing you're so fast, boy," said Lona. "Roll over now. It's time to go night-night." "Pleasant dreams, sweet dreams." "Pleasant dreams, sweet dreams, Nona," Pete said reluctantly. He stared out the bedroom window while his mind wandered. "Nona?" asked Pete. "Yes, Pete?" "Are you like Isn't Bee?" asked Pete. "Am I like who?" asked Lona. "Isn't Bee," said Pete. "You know, from Andy Griffin. You said that ain't isn't a word." "It's Aunt Bee, dear," Lona said with a chuckle. "They have southern accents, but that's exceptionally good grammar, Pete." "What's an accent?" "It's what happens when too many folks stay in one space for too long," Lona said. "Most of my second husband's family never left the house they grew up in. I couldn't understand a doggone thing any one of them would say to me, but they could understand each other perfectly." "So, are you like Aunt Bee, then?" asked Pete, uninterested in Lona's personal history. "What do you mean?" asked Lona. "Opie doesn't have a mom, but Aunt Bee takes care of him until he gets one. That's like you and me, right?" asked Pete. "I guess so, Pete." "Well, it's almost like that," Pete said, correcting himself. "Opie and Aunt Bee have their own rooms." "Don't you like sharing a bed full of snuggles with me?" asked Lona. "Sure, Nona. Who doesn't?" said Pete. "Our bed isn't big enough to fit my mommy and daddy, too. They're going to need somewhere to sleep when they finish growing up. Don't worry. When we get our new big house, you can still come to my room and tell me stories before night-night." "Oh, honey, I'm afraid I can't go with you after your new parents adopt you." "You're not going to come with me?" asked Pete. "Aunt Bee still lives with Opie and his daddy. Why can't you come with me, Nona?" Pete's eyes started to well up. He grasped Lona's arm as a tear fell down his cheek. Lona hugged him with all her strength as she rocked him back and forth. "Pete, I love you so much. Do you know that?" asked Lona. Pete nodded as he lifted his head and wiped away the tears on his cheek with his sleeve. "I will never, ever, ever stop loving you, no matter what," said Lona. "Do you love Nona too?" Pete nodded. "Good," said Lona. "Then you have a little piece of my heart, and I have a little piece of yours. This way, I'll always be with you. Whenever you look up at the sky at night, I'll be able to feel it, and I'll look up at it too. We can even pick out our own star together and meet there every night before bed." "Which one?" asked Pete. "There are hundreds of stars up there. The first star you see is the star where you'll find me," Lona said. "Everyone looks at the first star, Nona." "We need our own star," said Pete. "Good thinking, Pete. You're right," said Lona. "How about the second star? To the right of the first one." "Okay, Nona. I like the second star better anyways," said Pete. "What will we do when we get there?" "Anything you can imagine, sweetie," promised Lona. "All you need to do is get to that second star. Once you're there, you can do whatever you choose and be whomever you like. Anything you can dream up. Straight on till morning." "What happens in the morning?" asked Pete. "We don't have to worry about that until morning comes," said Lona. "We are here right now, and if you just think happy thoughts, we'll fly away and never land." Lona held Pete until she was sure he was fast asleep, then slowly and carefully inched her arm free. She crept back into the living room to watch In the Heat of the Night and tweak the prose of a poem on which she'd been working. After Pete's bedtime was the only time Lona had to be alone and create. On that night, however, Lona's head hit the cushion before she had the chance to pick up her pen and notebook from the coffee table. Pete woke up the next morning to find Lona lying lifeless in the living room. He assumed she was still sleeping and must need more rest if she were so tired that she couldn't hear or feel him tugging on her arm. Pete went to the kitchen and helped himself to a bowl of corn pops and brought it back with him to the living room. It was the first time he'd made cereal on his own. He watched Lona pour milk every morning. Pete only spilled a little bit. Pete began to worry as Monday afternoon rolled around. Lona had never slept that long before, and Pete was still waiting to go to the park. "Oh, Nona is going to have so much energy when she wakes up. She's been sleeping forever. We can stay at the park all day," Pete thought to himself. Pete repeated those thoughts in his mind as many times as he needed until he believed them. He sat cross-legged on the floor in front of Lona's dead body on the couch. His eyes stayed glued to the TV as if he were looking right through it. He got up occasionally to use the bathroom or rummage through the refrigerator for something easy to eat, but then right back to the television with a plate of Ritz crackers and chunks of liverwurst he'd broken off the log because he wasn't allowed to touch knives yet. He brought blankets from the bedroom and made a pallet on the floor next to the couch when the day's programming had ended. He told Lona the Mr. Fat Man story and kissed her on the forehead. "Pleasant dreams, sweet dreams, Nona," Pete said before lying down to stare at the ceiling until morning. Written and created by J.S. Thompson. Special thank you to the editors, revisers, and advisors, Robert Peach, Adam Herman, and John Jason Phillips. Episode 2, Broadway or Bust, of the short story episodic series Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up was recorded in Enchanted Santa Fe at the Pelipan Portal Studios. Our theme song, titled Grown Man, was written and recorded by Adam Herman and the Slamming Doors. Namaste, bitches.
It's gonna take a grown man, takes a grown man to let you go. But I'm nothing but a child wearing a grown man's clothes.
Adult Storytime Publishing presents Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up, Season 1, Episode 3, When Pete Met Gwendoline, by J.S. Thompson. ISBN number 978-1-961156-07-4. Copyright 2023, J.S. Thompson and Adult Storytime Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictionally to be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, organizations, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Season 1 is for Lona. Lona Celeste Harris, 1937 to 2010. We did it, Grandma. When Pete Met Gwendoline. "Gwendoline, my darling little Darlington, what are you up to in here?" asked Dr. Darlington, knocking on his daughter's bedroom door as he walked in. On the walls of Gwendoline's room hung a periodic table, a framed 8x10 photo of Albert Einstein sticking his tongue out, and 2 posters from the cartoon Strawberry Shortcake. It was the one television program Gwendoline's mother allowed her to watch each week. Blueberry Muffin was her favorite character, hanging just above the headboard of her bed, which matched the bedspread and window curtains. Huckleberry Pie was posted above her desk. Gwendoline's desk was neat and meticulously organized to the placement of her protractor at a perfect 90-degree angle at the top right corner of her desk. With her globe, microscope, and full set of Encyclopedia Britannica crowding her workspace, Gwendoline preferred to sprawl across the floor on her belly. "Oh, you know, just doing summer math like all the rest of the 8-year-olds in the world." Gwendoline was a highly intelligent child who excelled at everything she tried. Her parents recognized the potential for greatness early on and spread it thinly over multiple activities to protect said potential from being squandered. Piano lessons on Sunday evenings, equestrian and dressage every Monday and Wednesday, gymnastics on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and summer soccer played on Saturdays with practice every day. Household chores and next year's homework was also a daily staple of Gwendolyn's summer vacation itinerary. I didn't ask you to sass me, young lady. You also didn't ask me a very smart question, Dad, Gwendolyn said as she stopped writing and gently slapped her pencil down on her notebook. You already knew what I was doing. You're the one making me do it. Remember? Well, summer homework is more of your mother's thing, but... Please, Dad, she interrupted, looking back at him with a scowl. Gwendolyn picked up her pencil and began doodling circles around the daily math problems pre-written in her notebook while she bounced her legs against her backside. Both of you are working together to steal my childhood. You wouldn't have a childhood without us, he said, exhaling as he plopped slowly onto Gwendolyn's bed. You should just be grateful to have parents. We aren't trying to steal your childhood. We just want to do everything we can to prepare you for adulthood. God willing, you're going to spend a lot more time than the latter. You might as well get ready for it before it sneaks up and bites you in the keister. Do you mean grown-ups go to work and do math problems? Asked Gwendolyn. That sounds dumb. No. Well, some do, but never mind that. Do you want a break or not? Asked Dr. Darlington. You didn't say anything about a break. You didn't let me, he argued. You were too busy acting like your mother. Of course I want a break. Can I go paint or something? You know that your mother doesn't like you going into her studio and touching her art supplies. Ugh! At least someone would be touching them. I bet she won't even notice. Gwendolyn's mother, Lori, spent her life aspiring to be a famous painter. As soon as she found the time. She began several painting projects over the course of her adult life, but had yet to finish one, and hadn't started a painting since the birth of Gwendolyn. She still loved her medium, but she was resentful of the undeserved acclaim of lesser artists receiving admiration for rushed and uninspired hotel art. I wouldn't take you up on that bet with the last dollar of my worst enemy. That is, however, neither here nor there. What is here is a little boy who could really use a friend to play with, said Dr. Darlington. Is it Foster? Asked Gwendolyn. Is it who? Dr. Darlington asked, with a perplexed look on his face. I heard you and Mom arguing about the foster kid that was coming to live with Jim and May. That's Mr. and Mrs. Hookston to you, you little busybody, he corrected. Do you always eavesdrop on other people's conversations? Only when people have those conversations right in front of me, said Gwendolyn. Mom said she wasn't raising another child she didn't ask for. You said, not in front of Gwendolyn, which means you already knew I was listening. Then you said it would only be temporary. The kid has been through a lot, and you feel responsible, and this would be a safe way for Mr. and Mrs. Hookston to get a taste of what being parents is like. Then Mom said she doesn't know why you care so much about the neighbors anyhow, and... Okay, he surrendered. I get it. I made a miniature stenographer. May's father and I have been best friends our entire lives. I know you've heard me say that before. I watched that girl grow up. She might as well be one of my own children. I owe it to Chuck to look after her, especially now that he's off in Boca Raton enjoying his retirement. Dr. Darlington's gaze traveled out the window with a jealous grimace on his face, thinking about the life he planned that didn't come to fruition. Tortoise and hare my foot, he said without context. What are you talking about now? Gwendolyn asked. Nothing, he said morosely. Will you please just go play with the kid? Everything is an ordeal with you. That poor boy sat next to his dead caretaker like a sad golden retriever for 4 days before someone from the ladies' church found them. He hasn't complained once since I picked him up. He hasn't said much either, but he isn't complaining. Look out your window. He's just sitting there, alone, in your brother's treehouse. He needs a friend. Gwendolyn pressed herself up from her position on the floor reluctantly. 4 days? She asked, walking toward the window. How did he eat? What did he do with all that time by himself? She continued, picturing what it might feel like to be left unbothered for a week. For God's sake, don't ask him that, or anything about what happened. Only happy thoughts, okay?
I'm nothing but a child wearing a grown man's clothes.
Philip Darlington Jr. and Chuck Hookston grew up together in Hibbing, Minnesota. Chuck was the son of a mining tycoon, Thaddeus Hookston. Dr. Darlington's father, Philip Sr., was a miner for the Hookston Mining Company. Neither Chuck nor Philip Jr. wished to follow in each of their father's footsteps, so they left the Iron Range to attend school at the University of Minnesota in 1940. Philip Jr., on an academic scholarship and with what he'd saved over the years from shoveling snow, raking leaves, cutting grass, and pumping gas at the Amico station in Chisholm. Chuck's ride to higher education was funded by family money. They found themselves a couple of girls to date around halfway through the first semester. Chuck sat next to Evelyn Manderfeld, a pretty brunette from Copper Harbor, Michigan, in econ class. Philip Jr. occupied her roommate, Betty Albertson, on double dates. Betty grew up in Edina, a wealthy suburb of Minneapolis. The four of them were inseparable. From as many classes together as possible and part-time jobs at the Gopher Hole Pop Shop, on through graduation and the joint wedding and honeymoon they shared together. They loaded themselves and a modest amount of camping equipment into Philip Jr.'s Hudson and drove north up Old US 61. Their final destination was supposed to be in the small harbor town of Grand Marais and then into the Boundary Waters canoe area. The eastern hub of the BWCA was in Ely, which is where the boys grew up entering the Wilderness Reserve on fishing trips. They wanted to share a piece of their childhood with their new wives without having to honeymoon so close to their hometown. The drive would have taken around 4 hours had they not pulled over halfway so Chuck could use the bathroom. He peed near an overgrown trailhead that cut through a dense forest of red pines. The foursome followed the trail for a half-mile and stumbled upon a small clearing at the mouth of a tiny lake. They decided to camp there for the night. The guys fetched the tents and set them up facing the water on opposite sides of a lone-standing giant chestnut oak tree. The water was waist-deep, murky, and full of lily pads, but it was the perfect backdrop to stare at the future in front of them. The small clearing was at the ass end of a 5-acre plot of wilderness that happened to be for sale. It sat at the edge of the Londinium city limits and bordered the neighboring Native American reservation town, Gawakaki. At $30 an acre, the opportunity was too fateful to let pass them by. Chuck emptied his trust fund to build him and Evelyn a modest split level with a den, master bedroom, and spare room for house guests or a child one day. Philip Jr. and Betty rented a small apartment in Dinkytown. Both worked full-time at the Gopher Hole while they saved up to build a dream home, and Philip Jr. pursued his master's degree in social work and doctorate in psychology. His vision was too perfect to rush. A 2-story colonial with 4 bedrooms so all 3 of their projected children could have their own room. His den would be twice the size of Chuck's, with bookshelves covering the walls from floor to ceiling. It took some time, but Dr. Darlington and Betty settled into their woodland oasis in Londinium with all the desired specs met. The doctor began making family plans with Betty and drawing up plans for a shared garage with Chuck. There were also preliminary plans for the treehouse they'd construct with their eventual sons. Betty was the first to give birth with their son Terrence in 1960. Although not for lack of trying, Evelyn didn't follow suit until 1968 when she gave birth to a girl, May. May was the spitting image of her mother and even grew up to follow in her footsteps, not only by attending her alma mater, but also by falling in love there with the man she'd eventually marry. His name was Jim Jorgensen, a guitar-playing slacker from Lindstrom who loved fishing, smoking weed, and, from the moment he saw her, May Hookston. May had been fantasizing about her dream wedding and having a family of her own since she was 11, when her mother died of leukemia. Jim never thought much about the future. His weekend and summer job back home at Bobber's Bait and Tackle paid him enough to take May on cheeseburger dates and keep his dugout full of pot until his folk-funk cover band, Little Fish Town, made it big. Whatever the future held would be good enough as long as May was there with him. The idea of marriage and children seemed so far away, Jim didn't think twice about how soon what he thought was hypothetical wedding planning would become a reality. It came time to graduate. Jim didn't have enough credits to walk with his communications degree, but he had no idea what he was going to do with it anyways. May, on the other hand, received her diploma in business administration and was ready to start the life she'd been planning for 4 years. All of her plans had everything to do with her nuptials and little to do with her career goals. May wished her mother could have been alive to see her walk down the aisle, but beyond that, she and Jim had the backyard wedding May always dreamed about. Her 5 best gal pals in pink chiffon bridesmaid dresses, a home-crafted gazebo near the shoreline, and everyone watching her march towards it in an elegant gown with an obnoxiously long train. She didn't picture so many of her father's sales buddies from over the years to be in attendance, but May didn't mind. The reception doubled as a retirement party for Chuck, and all of his friends gave them cash in envelopes with the hole to see the face on the $20 bill as wedding presents. Jim moved into the house where May grew up. Chuck gifted the dwelling to the newlyweds as a graduation present to May on his way to Boca. Jim dropped out and got a job unloading ships for the Lake Superior grain silos while he looked for something better. The hours were early morning, but as unmotivated as Jim was towards most things in his life, getting up at dawn was not one of them thanks to his love of angling. The work was repetitive heavy lifting, but the eye-level view of a sunrise breaching the horizon line of Lake Superior never got old. Although far more breathtaking on this freshwater ocean, the view reminded Jim of the mornings he spent in the middle of Lake Lynn back home. Jim lived a short jaunt from the lake through sparse woods. He'd portage and paddle the family canoe out to wake and bake under the guise of fishing every morning before school. Jim hoped to stash some cash away and get some momentum rolling with his music before he and May started making babies. May didn't want to wait however long it might have taken Jim to feel financially stable. Dr. Darlington was still assigned to Pete's case and was responsible for finding him a home outside of the orphanage he'd been living in since Lona's death. Pete coming to live with Jim and May was the closest thing to a middle ground they produced. Pete spent the first few hours at his new home in the treehouse outside of it. May looked out on him from her living room window. There wasn't much to be seen in the treehouse from such a low angle. However, every once in a while, May would catch a glimpse of Pete's head bobbing spastically past the window cutout. "He's been up there for a long time, Jim. What do you think he's doing up there? Shouldn't we go get him or something?" May asked. Jim sat on the couch, strumming his guitar while he listened to the Twins play baseball on the radio. "Don't ask me. The kid came in talking about wolfmen and shit. I know he's been through a lot and all, but I don't think he knows the difference between reality and his imagination." "What 4-year-old does, Jim? It doesn't mean he's damaged. He's just being a normal kid. I don't see how any kid could sit and watch TV next to a corpse for 4 days and be normal afterwards. I don't know how to deal with that. Do you?" "We'll figure it out. You just have to go with it," she assured him. "It seems like all I do is go with it, honey," Jim said, standing up for himself timidly. "What's that supposed to mean, dear?" May asked as she turned around with her arms folded across her chest. Nothing. It's just that, well," Jim rubbed the back of his head, trying to find the right words. "You know that I love you more than anything in this world. I would do anything to make you happy. I even took your last name when we got married." May walked to the couch and sat next to Jim, grasping his arm tenderly. "And I love you so much for that, James. It takes a real man to go to the lengths you do to make me smile." "Tell that to my father." Jim and his father, Franklin Jorgensen, hadn't been on speaking terms since the minister pronounced Jim and May Mr. and Mrs. Hookston at the wedding. Franklin was already angry with Jim for dropping out of school before the surprise ending to the Jorgensen family line. He worked double shifts and weekends, both at the August Shells Brewing Company and Pillsbury Flour Mill, to send his son to college and give him a better life than the one he had. "See there? Don't you want to be everything your father wasn't? This is your chance, with a boy who desperately needs a father figure." "I know that, and I do, someday. The old-fashioned way, though, like handing out cigars to my buddies in the waiting room after you gave birth to my baby boy. I just think we're moving too fast. I mean, I haven't had the time to cast a line all summer. You have a lake right there in our backyard, honey. You can teach Pete how to fish. How about that?" "No. I had a lake in my backyard back in Lindstrom. I'd be lucky to catch bait in that pond out there," he said, pointing towards the backyard. "It's not just that, though. I miss so much rehearsal, I'm afraid I'm going to get kicked out of my own band. We've had something planned with your friends that is too important for us to miss every weekend. Did I tell you they changed our names to the Rounded Anglers last weekend while we were at your friend Joanne's baby shower?" "You tell me about a name change every other month," she said. "How is anyone ever going to know who you are if you keep changing the name of your band? You won't be questioning our process when we're selling out arenas like Guns N' Roses. I swear, we are just one song away." "From what, Jim? Having a song? You guys don't even play your own music." "Maybe we would if I had more time to write songs." "Our life isn't in Lindstrom, Jim. It's here. Do you think we could afford a home like this one, the one my father gave us, with you working for Bob in the bait shop for the rest of our lives? We're only going to have Pete for a little while anyhow. I promise to give you some time to play with your friends before we have a child of our own, okay? Look out the window. Little Gwendoline is climbing up the tree to play with them. We have a built-in babysitter. I told you being parents was going to be easy. Our life is good, baby. Just go with it. Gwendoline poked her head up through the opening in the treehouse floor to find Pete punching and kicking at the air. He didn't realize Gwendoline was watching until an imaginary flying kick to his chest sent him stumbling in her direction. He paused only for an instant before delivering a swift spin kick high above Gwendoline's head. Was that kick aimed at me? Gwendoline asked with a pang of offense as she hoisted her lower half into the treehouse. Pete finished off an elaborate kick-punch combo, rested his hands on his knees while he caught his breath, and looked at Gwendoline as he stood up straight. There was foot next to you, he said. I know, it was your foot, and it was way too close to my face, she said. No, the Foot Clan. They were going to get you. I beat them up just in time, though, so don't worry. Gwendoline wasn't well versed in the Ninja Turtles, and her overscheduled young life didn't leave much free space for daydreaming. Imagination wasn't one of Gwendoline's many natural gifts. However, with Pete, she did her best to logic her way through it. What's a Foot Clan? Asked Gwendoline. The evil ninjas lying dead on the floor. Don't you see them by your feet? He asked as if it were obvious. Oh boy, well thanks for saving me then, she said, playing along. You're welcome, girl, he said with folded arms and the proud look of a hero on his face. The Shredder sent the foot soldiers after me, not you. Why is the Shredder after you? She asked. He's the bad guy and I fight crime, he said, shrugging. That's just what we do. He must have found out that I'm out here all alone. Why are you out here all alone? Because the rest of the turtles don't get me, he said defensively. They think I'm weird, but I don't need them. I can beat the Shredder by myself. Why do you ask so many questions, girl? My name isn't Girl, said Gwendoline, but you called me Boy. Pick a game and stick to it. I'm Pete. Pete? Is that short for Peter? Asked Gwendoline. No, it's long for Pete. I like Peter better, said Gwendoline with confidence. What's your name? Asked Pete after a pause. Gwendoline, she said proudly. Wendy, said Pete, trying his best to pronounce her name. Wendy? That is not my name. Ick. I like Wendy, though, Pete said as he shrugged his shoulders and continued flailing around pseudo-karate moves. Now what are you doing? She asked, trying her best to keep up with Pete's imagination. Can't you see? He asked. The Foot Clan is coming back to life. I'll help you, she said. I can be a turtle. Pete stared blankly at Gwendoline. You can't be a turtle, he said matter-of-factly. Why not? The turtles are boys. Girls can be turtles, too, exclaimed Gwendoline with angry fists at her hips. Not Ninja Turtles, he rebutted. I can be whatever I want to be. Even though my mother always tells me I'm going to be a lawyer because I like to argue so much. We aren't playing Perry Mason right now, he said. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You can be April O'Neil if you want, he said, offering consolation. Is she a turtle? No, she's a reporter, but she's a friend to me and my brothers. We save her life sometimes. I want to fight too. April is a ninja reporter now. What do you think about that? She said combatively. April doesn't know karate, but I guess I can teach you some moves really quick, he said. Just don't tell Master Splinter. My lips are sealed. Gwendoline pretended to zip her mouth shut, lock it up, and then throw away the key. The two of them climbed out of the treehouse to commence ninja training. Pete paused a few steps from the tree. His eyes glistened from tears fighting to stay in their ducks, and he wore a grin just slight enough to see the bottom of his two front teeth. What's the matter, Peter? Asked Gwendoline upon discovering Pete was no longer walking by her side. It's Raphael. You gotta call me by my turtle name. Fine. What is it, Raphael? She said reluctantly. You're weird too, huh? Are you calling me weird, or asking me if I'm aware that I'm weird? I don't know. The other kids at the Orphan's Edge said I'm weird, and you do the same stuff that I do, so you must be weird too. Well, I don't think I'm weird, and I don't think you are either, she said. Those kids at the orphanage who told you that are buttheads. Ha! Ha! I bet they fart out of their nose, Pete said with a belly laugh, thinking about the image of butt cheeks where a head should be.
I'm nothing but a child
occupied every time slot Gwendoline had available that summer. He struggled to figure out what role May and Jim were supposed to play in his life, but Gwendoline was always a friend to play with. He didn't have to think much about that. Gwendoline had fun playing with Pete, but what she appreciated most was a break from her responsibilities. They pretended to be Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, and any other cartoon character Pete was infatuated with on a given day. The two of them picked dandelions, held the stems and popped the flowers off, chased lightning bugs at dusk, and went on treasure hunts to find skippers to throw across the lake. Pete cheered her on during her soccer games, waited patiently for her piano lessons to end, and tagged along everywhere Laurie would allow him. There was little that could separate the two of them from each other's hips until September neared. Gwendoline was starting the 3rd grade, and it was time to go back to school shopping. She enjoyed picking out the best supplies to help her get the best grade, and she looked forward to choosing new clothes to show her classmates how much she'd changed and matured over the summer. Laurie and Gwendoline had made supply shopping into a special event that the two of them shared since she began kindergarten. They would have lunch in between supplies and clothes, then see a movie at the Cinema 8 after they finished shopping. Gwendoline got to pick where they ate lunch and what movie they saw. It was the one day out of the year Gwendoline felt in control of her choices. Pete was more excited to go school shopping than Gwendoline. To his dismay, he was not invited to attend the mother-daughter tradition. He watched the two of them pull down the half-mile gravel driveway, then huffed and puffed his way back inside his house. "Why the long face, kiddo?" asked May behind the Cosmopolitan she was reading at the dining room table. "Wendy left me," Pete said, pouting from the doorway. "Aw, my poor baby. Come tell me all about it," said May, patting her thighs, inviting him to sit on her lap. "It's not fair. I want to play school too," Pete complained as he hoisted himself into May's embrace. "You want to play school?" she asked with a playfully disgusted expression on her face. "That doesn't sound like a very fun game, silly." "Wendy thinks it is. She's been talking about it all summer. But she went without me." "She only went school shopping, honey. Her mommy took her to get supplies before school starts. But she'll be back later." "What about my supplies? I can't start school without my supplies." "What are supplies?" Pete whined. "Well, you're not starting school yet, Pete. You have a whole year before you need pencils and trapper keepers of your own. Gwendoline is much older than you, so she has to go to school every day, but you get to stay home and play all day. Isn't that wonderful?" "Who am I going to play with while Wendy's at school?" he asked. "What about me?" she asked, leaning dramatically to the side to look Pete in the eyes, grasping her chest in jovial disbelief. "You're too grown up to play games." "Just because I'm a grown-up doesn't mean we can't have fun," she said. "Okay," Pete said gleefully. "Do you want to go play in the treehouse?" "I'm afraid I have, unfortunately, grown up too big to fit in that treehouse. I haven't climbed that thing since I was a little girl." "How about something on the ground?" May suggested. "How about doctor?" asked Pete. "Excuse me? Play what? Where did you learn that game?" she asked with frantic concern. "From the stories. I want to be a doctor when I grow up, like Vance Dexter." "Vance Dexter? From the soap opera Forever Young?" she asked with slight relief. "Yep. This is the Amnesia Ward, and we can help people remember stuff, okay?" "You're too much, Pete," May said, trying her best not to laugh. "You know what? Now that I think about it, you kinda do look like that Dr. Dexter. Yeah, in the nose. Maybe you'll be a doctor one day." "Do you really think so?" he asked with hope in his eyes. "Sure. Why not?" she shrugged. "If you grow up to be as handsome as Christoph Martin, you can be whatever you want to be, one day. Today, let's just focus on some kid stories. How about that? I like stories. Nona told me stories all the time. Do you know the one about the fat man?" "I can't say that I do. I'm out of touch with the new stuff. I was much more of a bookworm when I was little." "Do you like to read books, Pete?" Pete shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know how to read yet." May shook her head and smirked. "Of course not. I forget sometimes you're just a baby." "I'm not a baby. I'm almost 4.5. I know some words," he said with waning confidence. "Are big kids supposed to read?" "Everyone reads. Even grown-ups when they have the time." May swayed from left to right in whimsical reminiscence. "Oh my goodness, honey. Books were the best. You can go anywhere in the world or space through words and pictures. Let me think. I gave all my childhood books to Gwendoline when she was born, and if I remember correctly, Uncle Phil stashed them somewhere when Gwendoline outgrew them. Those books are a valuable treasure, no doubt about it. It might be hard to find, though. We're going to have to hunt a little bit. Are you up for a treasure hunt, Pete? You know I'm up for a treasure hunt. I'm really good at them. You can even ask Wendy. Who's Uncle Phil, though? Oh, that's just what I call Dr. Darlington next door because he was like a second father to me growing up. 2 dads? Pete thought to himself enviously. The 2 of them went to the Darlington house and scoured through the junk tucked away in the extra room at the end of the hallway until finding a box marked miscellaneous books. Anything not deemed worthy of gracing space on the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf in Dr. Darlington's office was thrown in a box for the rummage sale they planned to have one day. What about this one? Pete asked, holding up one of Laurie's old Harlequin romance novels. Too thick, said May, thinking quickly. Thin to win, Pete. The short books are way more fun. Pete sifted through the pile of books and found the 2 that he wanted to take with him. Puppies Are Like That and Cookie Monster and the Cookie Tree. May read each book to him twice, at Pete's request. By the end of story time, Pete had forgotten all about being abandoned by Gwendoline and was back to running around the house by himself, blasting ghosts with his imaginary proton pack. Jim came home from work that evening to shots fired as he walked through the front door. They came from Pete and his broomstick gun. Jim was exhausted and not in the mood to pretend. Oh, hey there, Pete. It's nice to see you, too, Jim said sarcastically. How is Gwendoline surviving without her little shadow? You can't take your shadow off, Pete said bluntly. She took it to school shopping. Oh, I see. My mistake, Jim said. Hurry, Ray. Shut the door before the wolfman gets in behind you. What? Jim asked with waning patience in his voice. You know, honey, the wolfman, May interjected, signaling Jim to play along. I don't ever know what he's talking about. Who the hell is Ray? Relax, Jim, said May. I don't always know either, but it's obviously a game he's playing. Haven't you ever played a game? Baseball. Now that's a game. If he were a little fonder of that game, we might have something to talk about. Jim kicked off his shoes, adjourned to his spot on the couch, and turned the radio to AM 610 in an attempt to tune out Pete's silliness. You just got into baseball, Jim, said May. Out of the apparent thin air, I might add. You don't even know what you're talking about. I know the Twins are in a pennant race right now. And what does that mean? Asked May. I don't have time to explain it to you. The game is about to go into extra innings on the radio. I was hoping to relax and finish listening to it after a long, grueling day at work. It's even more stupid that you listen to it on the radio, May said. What a boring hobby. Well, it's about the last one I have, said Jim. I haven't made it to rehearsal all summer. I've got a lake in my backyard with no boat to fish out of. I can't even swim. I can't even swim. A set of headlights shined through the window, redirecting May's "Are you serious?" stare away from Jim and out the living room window. Laurie and Gwendoline were coming home from their day of shopping. Pete, I think I hear Gwendoline coming home, said May. Why don't you run over and see all the cool stuff she picked out? Pete didn't hesitate, nor did May waste any time picking up the impending argument from where she and Jim left it. Will you not talk about marijuana in front of him like that? May said softly, as if Pete could hear her from outside. I'm sorry, James. I want you to grow up and not get high all day long. Sue me. Come home and have a beer to relax like an adult. You shouldn't have to go to outer space to wind down. Half a joint in a baseball game is hardly on the moon, May, he said. Don't exaggerate. We've gotten high together like 1,000,000 times. Try twice, honey, she said, correcting his math. Now who is the exaggerator? Besides, that was before we were parents. Things are different now. Foster parents, Jim corrected. Well, I've kind of been meaning to talk to you about that, May said timidly. Oh, no, don't start with that again, May, Jim said, rubbing his eyes in frustration. I'm trying to listen to the game. Jim turned the radio up. We are going to have to talk about it eventually, Jim. I mean, he's been with us for how many months now? They still haven't found him parents yet. 2. It's been 2 months. 56 days to be exact. It was the last time you let me smoke. Isn't Dr. Darlington the they that's supposed to be finding the kid a home? Is he even looking? I still don't even fully understand his connection either. I thought he was the chancellor or something of that private school. He's the headmaster of Lindinium Prep and capable of handling multiple responsibilities at once, May said, crossing her arms and turning up her nose. You could take a lesson or two, babe. Do you mean like how he found Pete a home in the first place? Said Jim. Look, at the end of the day, he's a great kid, but we aren't ready. Money is tight enough as it is, even with what the state pays us for fostering Pete. You know I'm going to be out of work when the lake starts freezing over. School clothes, Christmas and birthday presents, they all cost money, May. What if he wants to play hockey one day? Do you know how fucking expensive youth hockey is? Jim, you're talking about one day like it's tomorrow. Besides, he's tall for his age. And, in case you haven't noticed, he's black. He's probably going to play basketball anyhow. We've got time, baby. We'll be fine off your unemployment over the winter, and you're such a hard worker, I know that you'll get promotions and raises up the wazoo. I can help too. Joanne started selling Mary Kay. I can do that. Mary Kay? Asked Jim. Sure. What's so hard about selling makeup? Every girl wants to be pretty, right? My father outsold every other salesman at Bristol-Myers for 22 years. It's in my blood. I don't think the sales gene is hereditary. There's only one way to find out, May said quickly. Pausing, she added. But you're right. We don't need to talk about this now. May got up from the couch, grabbed a dining room chair, and brought it to the kitchen cabinets above the sink. What are you doing? Asked Jim. She reached up and pulled the sandwich bag from the space between the cabinets and the ceiling. I don't give you enough credit, Jim. I'm sorry. You've been really good about not smoking, May said, extending the baggie to Jim as she walked back into the living room. 56 days is a long time. You deserve a treat. Is that what I think it is? Asked Jim with a smile. I pinched a little bit of your last bag of dope for a rainy day, May said proudly. Let's get Pizza Hut and rent a couple movies from Video Vision. New releases are 99 cents tonight. You can smoke a joint and listen to the rest of your game in the car on the way. Jim was a bit miffed about May pinching his stash, but happy to not have the conversation that would eventually evolve into a fight, which Jim feared he'd inevitably lose. May definitely inherited the sales gene from her father. She could be as charismatic and persuasive as she needed to be, and Jim was too in love to put up a respectable fight if there was something May wanted. He accepted any and every win he could eke out, like smoking weed before he got home from work in the evenings for the past 56 days. There was a late ship delivery, according to Jim, which caused him to stay and work late every night over the past 2 months. He had a routine of pulling over and smoking a joint outside of his car before pulling into his driveway. A smoking flannel he wore over his work shirt and bottle of cool water cologne to mask the smell, Clear Eyes eye drops to get rid of the red eye, and a pack of wintergreen Tic Tacs occupied the trunk of Jim's Ford Tempo to aid in hiding his habit. Jim passed by Pete and Gwendoline playing on his way to the car. They were singing and stomping around, holding their lower backs with one hand and tapping large sticks against the ground with their other hand. What are you two weirdos up to? Asked Jim. Old man, sang Pete. Old lady, sang Gwendoline. Old man, old lady. Old man, old lady, they sang in unison. Jim shook his head with a slight smile. Whatever. I'm going to get a pizza and some movies. I'll be back. Oh, yes! Exclaimed Pete, pumping his tiny fist. Can Wendy come over? I don't care. You better ask your parents, though, Gwendoline, said Jim. It would be better if Peter asked my parents, said Gwendoline. It's harder for my mom to say no to him. Okay, said Pete, taking off in full sprint without hesitation. Aren't you going to go with him? Jim asked Gwendoline as he pulled his flannel from his trunk. I'll catch up. Why are you putting a jacket on to drive? Asked Gwendoline. It has to be at least 70 degrees out here. It's still hot. Who are you, Mr. Rogers? Ha! Jim said loudly. That was so funny I forgot to laugh. No, you didn't. You laughed. It's called sarcasm. You shouldn't try to battle wit with adults, Gwendoline. Okay, well, your trunk is making your jacket stink, so you probably shouldn't keep clothes in it, Mr. Hookston. The screen door of the Darlington house slammed behind Pete as he sprinted out of it, and the gravel kicked up behind Jim's tires as he peeled off, swallowing the frustration of letting an 8-year-old get the best of him. Lori reluctantly agreed to let Gwendoline attend Pete's pizza party. She expressed her reservations to Dr. Darlington after Pete ran out the door. "How many times have I told that child to stop slamming my fucking screen door?" Lori shouted, pacing the room. "Was he born in a barn?" "He didn't leave the door open, Lorraine," said Dr. Darlington from the groove in his lazy boy. He puffed cherry tobacco from a Sherlock pipe and stared at yesterday's edition of the Londinium Tribune in front of his face. "Don't correct me right now, Philip. I swear to God. I'm pissed." "Are you sure this isn't about Gwendoline not wanting to walk the runway for your little fashion show?" said Dr. Darlington, looking at Lori over the top of his newspaper. "It was our little fashion show. Every year, we end our day together with her modeling all of the clothes she picked out." She stopped pacing and directed her shouts at her husband. "She's spending too much time with that boy next door. Are you listening to me, Phil? Can you hear me from your favorite chair? Or are you more concerned with rereading all the news that was barely worth reporting yesterday than with the well-being of your daughter?" "Perhaps she's just growing up, dear. Isn't that what we're going for?" he asked. Dr. Darlington folded his paper, rose from his chair with a grunt, and walked over to the front window to stare out while he brought his point home. "Part of that," puffs his pipe, "is wanting to spend more time with their friends than you. She'll come back around. Times is always a-changin'. It's the only constant, you know." Lori rolled her eyes. "This better not be a sign of times to come, Phil. Gwendoline doesn't need any distractions this coming school year. We've worked too hard for her to get ahead of the class to let her fall behind now. For God's sakes, Lorraine, she's in the 3rd grade. To be technical, she isn't even in the 3rd grade yet. Relax. Don't tell me to relax. And don't call me Lorraine, Philip Jr. Lorraine is my mother's name. She relaxed with me, and look where I ended up. Oh, I didn't think about it that way. What a horrible consolation prize your daughter and I have been. Don't do that, Phil. You know what I mean. My parents were both successful and powerful lawyers. They had every resource and opportunity to pass on to me, and they chose to push me into the arts instead. I spent nearly 3 decades of my life working dead-end jobs and struggling while I waited for my opportunity to be the Monet of Minnesota or something. I asked God for the inspiration to paint a masterpiece, and he gave me a child instead. At least she still has the potential to do something great. I'll be damned if I'm the one who'll be responsible for wasting it."
I'm nothing but a child, wearing a grown man's clothes.
Special thanks to the editors, revisers, and advisors, Robert Peach and John Jason Phillips. Special thank you to the Slamming Doors for our theme song, Grown Man. When Pete Met Gwendoline was recorded in Enchanted Santa Fe at the Pelipan Portal Studio, 2023. Written, recorded, and produced by J.S. Thompson. Namaste, bitches.
Take a grown man, takes a grown man to let you go. I'm nothing but a child, wearing a grown man's clothes.
Adult Storytime Publishing presents Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up, Season 1, Episode 4, The Halloween Blizzard of '91, by J.S. Thompson. ISBN number 978-1-961156-08-1. Copyright 2023. J.S. Thompson and Adult Storytime Publishing, LLC. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictionally to be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, organizations, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Season 1 is for Lona. Lona Celeste Harris, 1937 to 2010. We did it, Grandma. Halloween blizzard of 91. A year passed by with Pete living at the Hookston house. Dr. Darlington was of little help to Pete's adoption process as a caseworker. He interviewed one couple that was more interested in adopting an infant with less potential baggage, but other than that, Dr. Darlington's year was spent tending to his own garden. The job he tolerated for the pension, raising his daughter, and tiptoeing around his wife's emotional landmines. He felt as if he were always babysitting. He'd even look after Pete when Jim and May needed a date night, which also alleviated some of the guilt from not having found Pete a permanent home yet. Neither Jim nor May enjoyed the art of cooking. They preferred drive-through cuisine and frozen dinners in front of the television over hamburger hot dish or pot roast around the dining room table. Their fast food lifestyle grew expensive during Jim's hiatus from the grain silo. They let it ride and survived the winter. However, Jim got a second job that spring bussing tables on the new dinner cruise pirate ship that was docked one pier down from his main gig. The Jolly Roger was one of two ships in the Gitchy Gumi Pirate Experience's armada. The vessel docked and set sail from its slip on the Londinium side of Lake Superior in the city's tourist hotspot, the Canal Park District. Its counterpart, the Ouida, anchored down at night at the Barker's Island Marina across the bay in Superior. Dinner service was timed to end as the ships neared each other in the middle of the big lake, firing pyrotechnic cannons at one another. The battling buccaneers commandeered each other's frigates to commence impromptu sword fights, choreographed to clinking sounds over the ship's PA system. The intra-pirate riffs and banter played up on the Minnesota-Wisconsin border battle. The experience concluded with both ships feeling like winners as the pirates and patrons dance and drink together on their way back to shore. The extra cash flow afforded fancier date nights for May and kept Pete flushed with enough action figures and Disney VHS tapes to keep him occupied for the summer. Jim got to worry less about the winter and felt like a legitimate provider, but he was constantly working. His mother Margaret reminded him on a weekly basis of how short a distance an apple rolls once it falls from the tree, in reference to Jim's father Franklin and his insatiable work ethic. Neither Jim nor Franklin appreciated being compared to one another. They still weren't on speaking terms, if you don't include the disappointed contemplations from Jim's father about where he went wrong in the background of Jim and his mother's Sunday evening phone calls. May loved many aspects of motherhood. The way Pete's eyes lit up with love every time she entered the room, access to hangout sessions with her friends from high school that had been relegated to child birthday parties, and an excuse to watch cartoons and play silly games. However, waking up early and getting Pete ready for school in the morning wasn't a labor of love she was well equipped to honor. Both Pete and Gwendoline were enrolled in Morgan Park Elementary. They lived at the outermost edge of the district, which meant their stop was first on the bus route. 5:55 a.m. every morning, and not a minute later. Their bus driver, Davy, was a retired 4-star naval admiral. He served his country for 44 years without taking the time to find a wife or make babies to share his life with after retirement. Driving the bus helped Davy pass the days, and gave him somewhere else to wear his service dress uniform, besides on his way to the mailbox to get his pension check. The stripes and war medals pinned to Davy's jacket were always initially impressive to the students who were new to his route. However, the whispers of what was underneath the eye patch he earned with the help of a misfired fugazi never seemed to dissipate. Gwendoline stood alone, waiting for the bus at the end of the driveway. "Where's your boyfriend today, little girl?" Davy asked, cranking the bus door open. "Gross out, Mr. Davy," she said with a sour face. "Peter is practically a baby." "You're all babies to me," he said, shaking his head. "Where is he just the same?" "He's on his way. Can't we just wait 1 minute?" "It's already 0500 hours and 55 minutes, Gwendoline. I don't see him running down your driveway yet, and I doubt he can run a half a mile in 22 seconds. That's when it'll be 0500 hours and 56 minutes. That would make me late. That is unacceptable." Mrs. Hookston woke up late, not me. She told me to walk down ahead and wait for Peter. He's supposed to be right behind me." "She told you to wait?" he asked, pointing at Gwendoline. "Well, yes, but I think she meant for me to tell you to wait," she clarified. "Do you think she meant for you to ask me or tell me?" "Probably ask," she shrugged. Davy paused. "Well?" Gwendoline sighed. "Will you wait for Peter, please?" "No," he said quickly. "You can wait here if you'd like. but we are as of now 32, 33, 34 seconds behind schedule already. To wait for Peter wouldn't be fair to the rest of the kids who are promptly waiting and respecting other people's time. By the time I finish speaking, we'll be 40 seconds late. Are you coming?
Gwendoline stalled and meandered halfway up the first stair as slowly as possible. She turned back with hopes of seeing Pete running down the driveway, just catching a glimpse of him sprinting towards her as Davy cranked the door shut in her face. "Wendy! Wendy! Wait! Here I am! I'm ready!" Pete screamed, waving his arms frantically at the yellow blur pulling off down the frontage road without him. Pete turned around with his head hung low. It was no ordinary day of school Pete was missing that late September Friday. It was popcorn day. It cost 25 cents a bag. Pete hunted quarters in the couch cushion for 2 weeks until he found enough to bring popcorn home for everyone. Pete shook the quarters around in his pocket like dice and dragged his feet through the gravel slowly on his short walk back home. May, assuming Pete made it safely on the bus, went back to sleep. Pete, upset his plans were foiled, hurled his fistful of quarters at May's bedroom door and began to weep. May was startled out of her slumber by the hollow clang of change against the faux wood door. "What's happening? Jim?" said May, flinging open the door. Pete had already marched into the living room. He was sitting cross-legged in front of the television with an afghan draped over his head. Pete pouted with his arms folded and pretended not to hear May calling his name. "Pete, is that you underneath your blankie?" "No," Pete said angrily. "Oh, I see. Do you know where I can find Pete?" "I thought he was on his way to school," said May. "I don't know. Wherever he isn't at popcorn day," pouted Pete. "Okay. What are you doing then, whoever you are?" "Watching TV," Pete said bluntly. "How can you watch TV from under a blanket, you silly goose?" said May as she yanked the blanket from Pete's head. "Hey!" he shouted. "I'm listening to the TV. This isn't old David the Gnome. I saw this one." "It is you, Pete. Fibber. Was that you crying bloody murder in here? Why aren't you on your way to school right now? Didn't Gwendoline wait for you like I asked her to? You made me miss popcorn day," Pete said, starting to cry again. "Don't cry, honey. What's popcorn day?" she asked. "At school. Popcorn. Movies. All my new friends. I've been Pete stammered through his tears. "Is that all? A little popcorn?" asked May. "You don't get it. I was going to—" "Because we have some Act 2 in the cupboard," May said, cutting Pete off. "I can make you some popcorn, honey." "It's not the same. Why didn't you wake me up 5 minutes early? Admiral Davy doesn't wait for kids. What if I don't know as much as the other kids on Monday?" "I'm sorry, sweetie. I didn't mean to let you down," May said, holding back tears of her own. "I'm trying my best." Pete saw a tear run down May's cheek and felt bad for yelling when she was doing the best she could. "It's okay. I'm sorry. I can have popcorn day some other time. Don't cry. You're doing a good job." "Thanks, buddy," May said, hugging Pete. "You know, you're pretty understanding for a 5-year-old. How did you get so good at understanding things?" asked May. Pete shrugged his shoulders and half smiled at the compliment. "Hey, guess what?" asked May. "I have a great idea. Why don't we have our own popcorn day?" "But we don't have the Rescuers Down Under tape to watch like they have at school," said Pete. "We can watch Ernest Goes to Jail Again," suggested May. "Know what I mean, Vern?" replied Pete, quoting the movie. "I'll take that as a yes. Then, when The Price is Right comes on later, we can play along with the show and see who the best guesser is." "That's definitely me," he said proudly. "When I go to the grocery store with Wendy and her mom, I look at all the cans and boxes. I memorize the numbers. I better be on my toes then. Go run and put on your play clothes and I'll start the popcorn." "Cool. Maybe staying home with you is better than playing school after all," Pete thought out loud. "Don't get used to this, kiddo. This is the last day of school I'm going to let you miss. Since it's the last one,
Let's keep this our little secret and not tell Jim about it. Can I count on you, Secret Squirrel? May asked. Pete zipped his lips and threw away the imaginary key, then ran to his room to change. Unfortunately for Pete's attendance record, it wasn't his last absence. He was beginning to fall behind, so he moved to the PM kindergarten class. He'd missed the classmates he was starting to get used to, but he enjoyed hanging out with May and watching Swamp Thing on television in the morning. And riding the bus home with Gwendoline in the afternoon gave Pete something to look forward to throughout the day. Pete stood in line to board the bus home, eagerly waiting to tell Gwendoline about his first day in his new class. "Hey, Admiral Davy," said Pete, walking up the stairs to the bus.
"Private, we've spoken about this before," said Davy. "It's Admiral Nelson. I'm a decorated war hero, not a host for silly children's programming. That, or call me Mr. Davy."
"Yes, sir." Pete saluted Davy, then turned and marched in lockstep while scanning the occupied benches in search of his Wendy. Gwendoline was just as excited to reunite as Pete was. She waved her arms in the air and called out to him as soon as she saw his head poke above the front barrier. "Peter! Back here! I saved you a seat!"
"No yelling on the bus,"
shouted Davy. "Oh, yeah! Sorry about that, Mr. Davy!" Gwendoline shouted louder deliberately.
"Hi, Wendy,"
Pete whispered with an ear-to-ear grin on his face. "It was my first day of school today." "It was your first day in a new class, not your first day of school, goofball," she corrected. "Well, how was it? Sit down here and tell me all about it." "Well, Miss Bremish is the same, so that's good. All the kids are different, though." "Of course they are, Peter. Different classes have different kids. I thought we were all going to PM class." "None of my friends were there," Pete said. "You'll just have to make some new friends, Peter. I didn't know what anyone was talking about, and nobody asked me any questions. I don't think they want any new friends." "That's bonkers, Peter. Who wouldn't want a friend that's as nice as you are? Give them time to get used to you, and if they still don't want to play with you, then they can all go to heck. I don't have many friends at school." "I keep to myself," Gwendoline said proudly. "I always play by myself at home." "What do you go to school for if you don't have friends to play with?" he asked. "You don't need friends to play with at school. Trust me. By the time you get to the 4th grade, you'll be over it anyways. All the boys want to do is roughhouse, even with the girls. All the girls want to do is make fun of you for wearing horses on your sweatshirts. You go to school to learn how to be a grown-up. Then you get a job, get married, have kids. And then when they have kids, you turn into a grandpa, and I'll turn into a grandma." "Do you mean I'll be an old man and you'll be an old lady? I'd rather play the game instead." "Start it off, Wendy." "I'm not singing that song in front of everyone on the bus, and you don't have a choice. You don't get to play games when you grow up." "That sounds dumb," Pete said, slouching. "Also, we are sitting behind everyone, not in front of them. It's super dumb, but someone has to do grown-up stuff. My father complained about raking the leaves all day yesterday, but he still does it all the time." "What's so bad about that? You get to jump in the pile." "I don't even think my dad knows how to jump," Gwendoline thought out loud. "He doesn't like games. He's always too busy balancing his checkbook and stuff." "Let's jump in the leaves when we get home," Pete declared. Gwendoline happily obliged his suggestion. The two of them could barely contain themselves for the rest of the ride home. They ran past Davy shouting at them to slow down and kept the pace going all the way down the driveway. Pete and Gwendoline flung their backpacks, along with all of their cautions, into the wind the moment their feet touched the grass of their shared side lawn. The crimson and carnelian mounds of fallen leaves Dr. Darlington spent the greater portion of the previous day raking never stood a chance. Pete and Gwendoline dove in with belly flops and rolled over to make angels on their backs. The sound of laughter and rustling leaves traveled into the open window of Laurie's studio, interrupting the artistic flow she was about to enter. "Gwendoline Marie Darling, do you think your father spent all day yesterday raking these leaves to build you delinquents a playland?" shouted Laurie, walking outside as the screen door slammed behind her. "Maybe," Gwendoline said coyly. Jim pulled up in the driveway home from work early that day. He'd taken the night off from the Jolly Roger to look after Pete so May could attend a facial party. "Don't play dumb with me, young lady. Dust yourself off and get in the house.
I want you to get your homework done quickly so you can bag up these leaves before supper is ready. You and Pete can play after that, if there's time," said Laurie. "But Peter, but nothing. I don't see Peter out here doing what he's not supposed to be doing." "I don't see Peter out here at all now that you mention it," said Jim as he walked towards Laurie and Gwendoline. "Where is that little partner in crime of yours? Don't tell me he'd rather be watching TV inside than out here playing with you." "What?" Gwendoline asked. "You know, Pete, my foster kid, about yay tall," Jim said, waving his hand beside his waist. "I know who Peter is." "I don't know where Peter is, though," Gwendoline said. "What do you mean you don't know where Peter is? Wasn't he supposed to start riding home on the bus with you today?" asked Jim. "Maybe he took a different bus by accident," suggested Gwendoline. "Or maybe he missed it altogether. You know Mr. Davy, Mr. Hookston. He's leaving on time, with or without you." "Who the hell is Davy? Jesus Christ, does May at least know where Pete is?" asked Jim. "May is already gone, Jim," said Laurie. "She asked me to keep an eye on Peter until you—" "Booyah!" Pete sprung up from the pile of leaves he was hiding in like a stripper out of a giant birthday cake, startling both Jim and Laurie. Pete pumped his fist in celebration. Gwendoline laughed hysterically. "We got him, Wendy. They didn't even know I was in there," Pete boasted. "I knew he was in there the whole time," Laurie said, defending herself. "Sure you did, Mother," Gwendoline said sarcastically. "Why did you jump?" "I didn't jump until he did," Laurie said, pointing at Jim. "Don't worry about it. Worry about not getting into trouble. Go pick up your knapsack and meet me at the dining room table to go over what I'd like you to work on this evening." "Ugh, fine." Gwendoline got up off the ground, brushed herself off, then extended her hand to help Pete up. They high-fived each other as they parted ways towards their respective houses. "I can't wait to tell May how good we got you guys," Pete said to Jim as they walked up the front sidewalk. "Well, it's a good thing she wasn't home yet. Otherwise, she'd see you didn't take the time to change into your play clothes before getting dirty. I don't think she'd appreciate having to scrub and wash the new clothes I just bought you," Jim said. "That's why I wore my play clothes to school this morning. Once something is dirty, it can't get more dirtier," Pete said confidently. Well, never mind, sure. Are you telling me that May dressed you in those dirt-stained green corduroys and sent you out in the world like this? She didn't see them, but I know she doesn't like to wash clothes, so I thought I was helping. She said she wasn't feeling good and went back to bed before I got on the bus." Jim shook his head. "Well, at least you went to school, bud. Way to be a big kid. May was feeling sick again, huh? It's funny how she miraculously felt good enough to go to her Mary Kay thing. What a hypochondriac." "What's that?" asked Pete. "It's when you think you're sick, but you're really not," Jim said. "Is it like make-believe?" "Exactly, kiddo. It's make-believe." "Oh, that's fun," said Pete. "Yeah, it's a real blast," Jim said, rolling his eyes. "Thank you for taking me to the doctor, Joanne. And thank you for letting me bitch to you for hours afterwards as well," May said to her friend. They sat parked in front of May's house after what she told Jim was a Mary Kay party. "You betcha, Mayflower. I'm happy to be here for you. I'll call you tomorrow afternoon to find out the test results, okay?" No. I mean, no need to worry. It could be tomorrow or a few days. Maybe I won't hear back from the doctors at all, and that means everything is fine." "Fine and benign. Ha! No news is good news, am I right?" May said with nervous laughter. "Nonsense. They have to call you," said Joanne, shaking her head emphatically. "Your mother died of cancer, for heaven's sake. They have to know the emotional toll of waiting by the phone to find out if you have cancer. You can pretend to be calm about this all you want, but you wouldn't have called me to take you to urgent care on a Sunday if you weren't worried. I'm going to call you every hour on the hour, starting bright and early, until we know for sure that you are cancer-free. You really don't have to do that, Joe. I appreciate your concern, but I'll call you. No sense in worrying about something I can't control. I don't want to tell Jim until I have to, either. I don't want him to worry for no reason." May fixed her game face on the way up the sidewalk to walk in the front door with level 11 energy. "There my boys are!" May exclaimed, extending her arms for a hug from Pete. Pete sprang up excitedly from his seat in front of the television. He was watching one of his favorite VHSs at the time, Harry and the Hendersons. Jim was sitting on the couch enjoying a beer while he listened to the game and plucked at his guitar. "Hey, honey, did you sell all your makeup tonight?" asked Jim. "Very funny, honey. May I at least kick my shoes off and sit down before you make fun of me?" asked May. "That question was mostly optimistic," said Jim. "You don't have your giant case that seems to be filled with more stuff every time you leave the house with it. I was hoping for the opposite to be true." "Oh, you're right. I don't have it. I must have left it in Joanne's back seat," she said. "I have to buy more products if I want to sell more products, Jim. That's how sales work." "Don't you mean I have to buy more products so you can sell more products?" Jim clarified. "That might be a viable sales strategy if you actually had someone to sell to. All of your friends sell Mary Kay as well, and none of them are driving a pink Cadillac but Joanne. Phil even said it was a pyramid scheme." "Hydro cul-de-sac," Pete yelled as he broke free from May's hug. Pete was playing superhero before taking a movie break. He was wearing Batman briefs over his onesie and a cape made from his blankie, which had a hole in it large enough for Pete to stick his head through. He ran to mount himself on the couch opposite of Jim, then leapt to the love seat as if he were flying. "What did he say, Jim?" asked May. "Like I ever know," Jim said, grateful that Pete couldn't pronounce hypochondriac. Probably someone Batman fights. Just have to go with it, right?" May sat down on the couch, curling up next to Jim. "How was your day today, baby?" "It's going to be great if Jack and Kirby can bring us another World Series," Jim said. "Isn't this great, Jim?" asked May. "Isn't what great?" "This. Our little family. Me, you, Pete. We have it all, don't we?" "Of course, babe, but it's Game 7. Please, not right now." Okay, fine," said May. "Listen to your game. I'll leave you alone." "Hey, Pete, how was your day, little mister?" Pete was weeping quietly as he sat in front of the television, watching his movie. He turned around with glistening eyes, but didn't say anything. "What's the matter, Pete? Did something happen at school today?" asked May. Jim laughed. "Pete's fine, May. He's crying about the movie, that's all. He gets sad every time Harry has to go back into the woods, no matter how many times we've had to watch it. Like Bigfoot is real or something. It's hilarious." "It's not funny," Pete shouted. "Don't raise your voice at me," Jim scolded. "Don't make fun of him, Jim," said May. "Harry doesn't know why he can't stay with his new family. He's sad," said Pete. Jim laughed even harder. "See what I mean? Even if Sasquatch existed, he wouldn't get sad about a family. Harry would have eaten the family in the first act, and the movie is over." "It's okay, Pete. It's only a movie," assured May. "Why don't you go play superhero again? I think I saw the hydro-cul-de-sac run into your room. You better go save the city," she continued. Pete stood up, wiped his eyes, then planted his fists firmly into his hips. "Crime always needs fighting, I guess." He ran towards his room, somersaulted through the doorway, then kicked the door closed behind him. "Was that necessary, Jim?" "He's only 5, May said after she heard the door shut. "Yeah, a soft 5, said Jim. "A soft 5, James?" she asked. "Did you ever stop to think that maybe he relates to Harry? It's a Yeti. How can he possibly see himself inside a creature of myth?" asked Jim. "They both feel like they don't have a home or something. I don't know. Abandonment issues?" May said. "You sound like Phil with that psychobabble bullshit. Kids can't comprehend shit like that, especially one who lives in the clouds as much as he does." "So what? Pete has a silly imagination and the boy is a little sensitive. He's been through a lot. He's in school and making new friends now. I don't know what he would do without Gwendoline. Pete has a life here that he loves. I'm sure he's scared it's going to be taken away from him again." May and Jim argued back and forth over what quickly escalated to the subject of Pete's adoption. Pete eavesdropped from the hallway. He hated watching them quarrel, but was too curious of a child not to listen. He found an effective method of peacemaking over time by tugging at his foster parents' waists and asking them to stop fussing with cute vitriol. "That isn't going to work this time, Pete. I thought we told you to go play in your room," Jim said, unwilling to entertain the bit. The crack of a baseball snapped Jim's attention to the sound of an excited announcer calling the end of the baseball game. "And the Twins are gonna win the World Series. The Twins have won it. It's a base hit. It's a 1-0, 10-inning. Oh, great. I missed it. I got to listen to the Braves walk Kirby Puckett and Ken Herbick, sure, but I missed the ending," Jim whined. "Can't wait to get to work and talk about the game." "Oh, hey there, Jim. Hell of a game last night, huh? Where were you when Gene Larkin hit the game-winning single to make baseball history?" "I missed it, Bob. I heard Jack Morris throw his 8th strikeout after refusing to come out of the game, but the moment the Twins won Game 7 of the World Series in extra innings, I'm happy to say that I was trying to convince my foster kid that he's not a fucking Wendigo." "And look at you still breathing," said May. "I'll be sure not to interrupt you next time you're listening to someone else achieve something great. I wouldn't want to blow another chance at being a part of history for you." Pete ran into his room, slamming the door behind him. "Look what you did now," May scolded. "What's a Wendigo?" "It's like an Indian Bigfoot, I think." "Pete," Gwendoline said, standing above Pete as he lay asleep in bed. "What are you still doing asleep? Look outside." She shook him awake and pointed out Pete's bedroom window. "What are you supposed to be?" asked Pete as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Gwendoline was bundled head to toe in winter gear. Her snowsuit was so thick she had to walk like a land-dwelling starfish. The homemade knit scarf wrapped around her neck stopped just below her eyes. Her hat draped down just below her brow, and the fuzzy ball hanging from the top of it swung wildly as she coaxed Pete out of bed and over to the window. "This isn't my Halloween costume, you dweeb. It's a snowsuit." "To play outside?" "It's a fudging snow day," Gwendoline said giddily. Lindinium was in the early stages of a record-breaking 2-day snowstorm. The blizzard brought nearly 37 inches of snow in total over the next 48 hours. However, the aching pain of shoveling their cars out of banks created by the snowplows clearing the streets lingered in the lower backs of northern Minnesotans for weeks. All Gwendoline could think about that morning was a day off from school. "Holy cow! Look at all of it. There's snow up to the 3rd stair of the treehouse." "Did I sleep till Christmas?" Pete asked, watching the snow fall in awe with his hands pressed against the glass. "It's actually a rung, not a stair, Pete. And it's impossible to sleep that long unless you're a bear," Gwendoline said. "But I guess you could say today is a gift." "No school. Isn't that awesome?" "No school? Why not? Snow is outside." "I don't think you heard me. We don't have to go to school today," said Gwendoline, enunciating slowly through cupped hands. "It's the one day where there's nothing else to do but play. And you want to go to school? You're an odd duck, Peter." "I was going to go to school dressed up as Batman, not Howie the Duck," said Pete. "Everyone was going to love me in my costume. Now they'll never get to see it." The day after Jim and May's World Series blowout, Jim bought Pete a vinyl Batman costume to smooth things over. Pete tried it on and went to Gotham in his brain. He would have worn it every day until Halloween if he were allowed to. "Put it on over your snowsuit. Who gives a care?" Gwendoline said. Pete smiled and ran into the dining room to ask where his snowsuit from last winter was. Jim was sitting at the table, sipping coffee with a little Bailey's in it, tuning his guitar up to jam away the snow day he was also grateful to have been gifted. "Have you seen my snowsuit?" Pete asked, pressing on Jim's guitar strings to hold his attention. "I saw you outgrow it last winter, remember?" said Jim, removing his guitar strap with frustration. "You don't have a snowsuit yet." "My mom makes sure to buy all my winter clothes in the spring, and a size too big so I have room to grow into them." "You should have thought ahead, Mr. Hookston," said Gwendoline. "There were a lot of things I couldn't have seen coming last spring. A snowstorm in October being one of them," Jim said, deadpan. "What am I supposed to do?" "I don't get to play outside?" asked Pete. "Oh, shit. Here come the waterworks. Are you going to cry now?" Jim asked Pete. "May!" Jim shouted, summoning his wife, who was still slumbering soundly. "I'm not crying. I'm a big kid," Pete replied. "There you go. Big kids don't need snowsuits," Jim said. "Wendy has a snowsuit," Pete said. "Yeah, but Wendy is a girl. You're a boy, Pete. You're supposed to be tougher than that." My old man was too much of a tightwad to buy me snow gear, so I made do. Lots of layers and grocery bags always suited me just fine.
Grocery bags?
Pete and Gwendoline asked simultaneously. Sure, said Jim. You put them on your feet and tie them up tightly around your ankles to keep your socks from getting wet. Pretty neat trick, huh? Go and wake up May so she can help you get ready. Can't you just help me? Asked Pete. Yeah, Mrs. Hookston is still sleeping, said Gwendoline. You were just pretending to play guitar like you do every other day. Well, little miss from the cheap seats, today is a rare paid day off I intend to take full advantage of. Something my wife takes full advantage of every other day. It's my turn to relax. May layered Pete with sweatpants, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 crewneck sweatshirts, and 4 pairs of socks covered in plastic grocery bags from the Super Value store over his footed onesie. Pete put his coat on, then shimmied into his Halloween costume, stretching the vinyl seams of the cheap get-up to their limits. After he donned his Batman mask, atop of Jim's oversized 3-hole ski mask, Pete mashed his feet into his boots, slipped on a thin pair of gloves, then mittens, and stood eagerly next to the front door. Do I look warm? Asked Pete, presenting himself to Jim. Jim smiled and nodded. Boy, I remember my snow days back in Lindstrom. You kids have it easy nowadays, with the little thing on the bottom of the screen telling you when school is canceled. You even have a number to call that tells you the time and weather. I had to listen to the radio early in the morning until I heard them say Chisago Lakes was closed for the day. Cool story, Mr. Hookston, Gwendoline said, rolling her eyes. Are you going to get dressed and play with us since you have a snow day here in Lindinium? My dad is. He has to because he can't think of a better excuse. Yeah, everyone's going to play, assured Pete. Yeah, Jim, everyone is going to play, said May, walking out of her bedroom bundled for the elements. You don't have a better excuse either. Jim pretended to agree reluctantly. However, he was secretly as giddy to play in the snow as the children were. He couldn't resist an opportunity to flex the snow fort building prowess he prided himself on as a child. The blue ribbons his prized structures won from the annual celebration of Lake's Winterfest snow sculpture contest had been nailed to the mantel above the fireplace in his parents' home since the mid-'70s. I used to be the king of snow forts, Jim boasted. We are going to make a snow fort so strong you couldn't knock it over with a bulldozer. I'll let the two of you fight about who gets to use it during the snowball war. I'm the queen of snow angels, added May. I'll teach you how to make a perfect angel and get up without leaving a handprint. Everyone was properly bundled and on their way out the door when the phone rang. I'll get it, said Jim, chomping down on his glove to remove it. It's probably my manager from the Jolly Roger officially calling me off for my night shift. No, Jim, I'll get it, said May. You go start the fort with the kids. Jim agreed and went outside, only to be called back inside 30 seconds later. Jim, honey, shouted May. Telephone. It's your job. I told you it was for me, said Jim. Well, I thought it might have been Joanne. Either way, I tried to take a message for you, but your boss insisted he speak to you. Yellow, answered Jim. May I speak to Jim Hookston, please? Asked the voice on the phone. This is he. Is this Brian? Asked Jim, assuming it was his supervisor. What's with the formality and why do you sound so different? Are you sick? Man, sucks to be sick on a free day off of work, huh? This is Maurice Second-Star, chairman of the RBC. I believe we met at your JR orientation. As chairman of the Reservation Business Committee, Maurice directed the operations of all reservation-run facilities, determined approval status of all new businesses and construction in Gawakaki, and had major influence in the allocation of tribal reparation funds. Like his grandfather, the great Chief Victor Second-Star, Maurice had deeply rooted love and dedication for his tribe. He showed his love and dedication by treating every potential dollar earned as if it were a stone in the foundation of the community he was responsible for setting up to thrive. Oh, sure, said Jim after thinking for a minute. What can I do for you, Mo? Oh, wow. You can start by never calling me Mo again, son. I'll let it slide this time if you tell me you can work today. Work? Today? Jim asked, holding back frustration. The storm of the century is brewing outside, sir. I've covered that song from Gordon Lightfoot. It can't be safe to go out there. Of course not. No ship of mine is going down like the Fitzgerald. It is, however, Halloween.
And being snowed in with nothing else to do is a perfect reason for them to party and for me to make all the money every business that closed down won't. We're going to remain docked and open the bar for snowmobilers and hotel guests around the ship. Can I count on you, James? Asked Chairman Second Star. Gee, sir, I'd love to help out the team, but I'm just a busboy. I don't know anything about bartending. Beggars can't be choosers. This is an emergency. You can learn on the job. We'll all know that you don't know what you're doing, so it doesn't matter if you fuck up. The customers will be grateful just to have an open place to drink the storm out, no matter what kind of service they get. You know how to drink, don't you? Asked Chairman Second Star. I'm a quick learner, Jim said, burping up Bailey's. Ha! That's funny. You're clever, too. Unnatural, said Chairman Second Star. I appreciate your faith in me, Mr. Second Star, but I couldn't get down to Canal Park even if I wanted to. I'm way out in the sticks, and my car won't even make it down the driveway. Well, that's one of the reasons I called you. I noticed in your file that you live near me. I have a truck with four-wheel drive and a big-ass plow hanging from the grill. I'll come and pick you up. Be ready in 20 minutes. Unless you have another excuse in your busser apron. Jim was off to work and everyone else got to playing. Even Laurie made a willing and gleeful appearance to add artistic blotches of blue and red food coloring to Dr. Darlington's snowman, or Snow Bland, as she called it. May and Gwendoline made snow angels, while Pete searched for the perfect snowbank to build a fort that would impress Jim when he got home. He found it underneath the treehouse. Pete leapt from the highest rung of the treehouse that May would allow him into a tall drift he believed to be a snowbank. He sank to the bottom and burrowed himself out, laughing hysterically the whole time. So much so, he didn't notice his costume ripped on the way out. He returned to the drift with a garden spade to carve out a tunnel in which to hide with pre-made snowballs until someone came looking for him. You haven't made your angel yet, Pete. Where are you? Called out May. She poked her head into the top hole of Pete's snow fort and was greeted with a snowball to the face. She answered Pete with a light whitewashing. The Darlingtons made their way over to investigate the ensuing laughter, only to be greeted with an onslaught of unexpected flying powder. They all ran around the yard like children, pelting each other with snow until falling to catch snowflakes with their eyelids. The echoes of their belly laughter flowed throughout the woods surrounding them. As fun as the afternoon was, the adults suggested a break in the action to warm up. Only Pete and Gwendoline had any real intentions to go back outside. Dr. Darlington retired to his study. Laurie invited May over for coffee and Bailey's to expedite the thawing process. She made hot cocoa on the stove for the kids and brought it to them in the living room while they warmed their toes underneath the radiator. "Oh, is that Cool Whip?" Pete asked as Laurie approached wielding warm beverages. "Of course," Laurie said. "And baby marshmallows?" asked Gwendoline. "Are there marshmallows in the hot chocolate?" asked Laurie, correcting Gwendoline's grammar. "How should I know? That's why I was asking you. Duh," replied Gwendoline. "You can still lose your treat, young lady," warned Laurie. Gwendoline paused as if she were swallowing her pride. "I beg of your pardon, mother dearest. Are there any miniature marshmallows in the hot cocoa?" Gwendoline asked sarcastically. Laurie didn't appreciate the sass, nor did she appreciate both Pete and May being entertained by Gwendoline's antics. "What are you laughing at, Peter?" Laurie asked Pete. "Wendy's funny accent," Pete said. "Who is Wendy? That is a horrid nickname," Laurie said with disgust. "Mom, it's not that bad, and you've heard Peter call me that a bunch of times," said Gwendoline. "I didn't appreciate it any time I've heard it previously either. I named you Gwendoline. Not Gwen, not Wendy, and definitely not Lynn. Gwendoline." Dr. Darlington walked into the kitchen for more coffee. "Lighten up, Lorraine. They know I'm kidding. We were having fun. Why don't you go back into your nursery and play with Ken Burns, Jr.? I'll do that. The tapes I'm watching are on the Civil War. I just may learn something that'll come in handy around here," said Dr. Darlington, trying to drop his best figurative mic on the situation as he walked away. Jim came home later that evening with to-go boxes full of chicken wings and onion rings, a solid buzz, and a promise of promotion when the snow melted next spring. He and Marie Second Star drank Old Styles and spiced rum while they shot the breeze waiting for customers to show up. Jim didn't have much opportunity to prove himself as a bartender, but his willingness to work, seasoned with a good deal of inebriated FaceTime with the boss,
proved Jim to be worthy of a future barback position. Financially, it was a slight bump in tip-outs and one step closer to a full-time position somewhere higher up in the company with benefits in the future, as Chairman Second Star promised. A summer job on the Jolly Roger was far more enjoyable than hauling grain at dawn, and the joy he felt from working so close to the water was intensified to the umpteenth power when the Jolly Roger set sail. Jim felt the majesty radiating from the middle of Lake Superior under the moonlight. He would steal moments between courses when he could to stare at the deep purple horizon from the employee smoking deck on the back of the ship. Jim went there to breathe in a few pulls from his one-hitter, as well as to imagine what his future could be one day. He also enjoyed a drag or two from an Auerbach red here and there if his co-workers offered him one. Oftentimes, Jim pictured himself fishing alone, peacefully and far away from the sightline of the shore. Other times, he saw himself with a half-dozen tourists on a charter he was leading with his own boat. Lake Superior Hookers was at the top of the list for business names, if he didn't use it as a band name first, that is. Either way, he was on the water again, and that was close enough to his dreams for the moment. Our theme song, Grown Man, was written and recorded by Adam Herman and the Slamming Doors. Special thank you to editor, reviser, and advisor, Robert Peach. The Halloween Blizzard of '91 was recorded in Enchanted Santa Fe at the Pelipan Portal Studios.
Created by J.S. Thompson. Namaste,
Adult
bitches.
Storytime Publishing presents Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up, Season 1, Episode 5, Daddy's Home.
It's gonna take a good man, takes a good man to let you go. But I'm nothing but a child wearing a grown man's clothes.
By J.S. Thompson. ISBN number 978-1-961156-09-8. Copyright 2023. Adult Storytime Publishing LLC and J.S. Thompson. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination or are used fictionally to be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events, locales, organizations, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Season 1 is for Lona. Lona Celeste Harris, 1937 to 2010. We did it, Grandma. Daddy's Home. May let the phone ring and threw out letters from her doctor's office until they stopped coming. She was too busy chasing her dream of being a mother to focus on her impending fate in real life. May pressed the issue relentlessly, and her wish to be a mother was granted by Christmas that year. Her father, Chuck, flew in from Boca to complete her perfect family portrait and continue their long-standing tradition of Christmases at the Darlingtons, which now included Jim and Pete. May only intended to hold off learning of her diagnosis until the holiday Polaroids were developed and framed, but time slipped away from her. She knew in her heart that the doctor wouldn't have been blowing her up for no reason. However, she also knew that no one in their right mind would allow someone to adopt a child while actively fighting cancer, dying or not. The joy of motherhood and the fear of acknowledging death kept May smiling through her constant fatigue and nausea until March. May would have slept most of her days away that winter had Jim not been on hiatus from work. Jim was naturally an early riser and, without a job to go to in the mornings, he had nowhere to be. Still, he was insistent that May be the one to ready Pete for the day each morning. He'd pace the length of the driveway, smoking as much weed as possible before waking up May so she could wake up Pete, who was often already awake but waiting in bed to be woken up. Pete loved the song and dance of kisses and tickles, with which May accosted him while he pretended to sleep. Pete couldn't tell time yet. However, one day, it felt as if he'd lingered in bed for much longer than normal. Near the point of giving up on the bit, He heard footsteps moving briskly down the hallway outside of his room. Pete readied himself by curling up under his Ninja Turtle comforter in a fetal position, biting his cheeks to keep from smiling. The footsteps kept stomping past his door. The next sounds Pete heard were coughing, gagging, and violent vomiting coming from the bathroom. "Are you okay, Mom?" Pete asked, poking his head in the bathroom doorway. "I'm fine, sweetie. Go play, okay?" she said with her head resting on the toilet seat. "I'll be out in a little while." "But you're Ralphing, and you're putting your face where our butts go." "I wish," she said. "Nothing's coming up." "Well, why?" I don't know, honey." "Are you sick?" "When people throw up, it's because they're sick." "Then I must be sick, Pete. Please go watch TV. I'll let you know when it's time to get ready for school." Exhausted from dry heaving the contents of her already empty stomach and being berated with obvious questions from Pete, May went back to bed. Pete made himself a bowl of King Vitamin cereal and took to his favorite spot in front of the TV to watch Eureka's Castle. Maya the Bee played next. When that was over, Pete knew it was time to get dressed and go wait for the bus. Pete popped into his mom's bedroom to say goodbye before he left for school. May couldn't hear him over the sounds of her own snoring, and that worried Pete. He stayed at home to look after her. Pete got a row of saltines from the pantry and a can of Schweppes ginger ale from the fridge, then placed them on May's nightstand. He turned on the television before hopping into bed beside her. The old console TV in Jim and May's bedroom didn't have cable, so Pete turned the dials until a clear picture came on. An episode of his Nona's favorite soap opera, Forever Young, was playing. Pete hadn't seen the program in quite a while, however not much had progressed in the storyline. Dr. Vance Dexter was still falling in love with whoever that week's beautiful amnesia patient used to be before the traumatic brain injury that somehow left their faces unblemished. May was still sawing logs as the end credits rolled. Pete felt her forehead to check for a fever. It was warm but not hot, so we went outside to play for a while. It was 45 degrees by early afternoon that day, balmy for March in Minnesota. The temperature is relative in the Northland. After spending 2 months in sub-zero temperatures, it doesn't take much to make you happy. It's running errands in basketball shorts and a hoodie weather. Stuff your jacket in your backpack on the way home from school type weather. For Pete, it was slip on your hat and gloves to play outside in a t-shirt and make snowballs kind of weather. The snow on the ground was plentiful, but partially melted, dirty, and riddled with twigs. It was jagged and loose like a chocolate snow cone. However, it could still be forged into an unforgivingly solid snowball capable of breaking the skin when proper heat and pressure is applied. Pete made several to store in an old red cooler he found in the garage, then hauled his arsenal to the lookout post he designed to be inside of the treehouse. The illusion of warmth dissipates quickly when you stop moving. Pete sat shivering, waiting for enemy lines to encroach his territory for 20 minutes before relinquishing his post to go inside and warm up. As Pete reached the front door, he heard a car rolling slowly over the driveway gravel. It was Jim coming home from summer staff orientation on the Jolly Roger. Pete tried to run back to his post in the treehouse before being seen, but it was too late. "Pete!" Jim yelled, getting out of his car. "Rats!" said Pete. "You weren't supposed to see me." "What are you doing home from school already, buddy?" "Saving snowballs." "No, I meant, why are you home from—" "Saving snowballs for what, Pete?" Jim asked reluctantly. "To throw at people, duh," Pete said, throwing his arms in the air. "You made snowballs out of this junk?" "Yup. All you gotta do is press real tight in your gloves until it gets hard enough to make a ball," explained Pete. "You said a lot more than you realize there, kiddo. But what you made sounds like an ice ball. Are you trying to hurt somebody?" Jim reached into the back seat, grabbing a thin stack of orientation papers, his new red and white striped barback pirate shirt, and a large fast food bag. He and Pete continued to talk as they walked up the sidewalk. "No, I just thought it would be funny to wait until all the snow melts and then hit people with snowballs." "Well, funny is funny. Can't argue with that. I don't think it's going to work, though, Pete. How will you keep them from melting until then?" "In the cooler you bring lunch to your work in," said Pete, proud of his ingenuity. "You have to think things through a little further sometimes, buddy. I'm going to need that for my lunch when I go back to work." "I thought all the snow will melt before the boats come in." "Oh, really?" asked Jim. "Do they read you the shipping schedule on the PBS Kids Club?" "Nope. They say happy birthday to all the kids that have birthdays, though. I hope they say happy birthday to me this year." "All kids have birthdays, Pete. Only kids with parents that pay money to have that furry blue thing wish their kids happy birthday get to be Channel 8 famous. As far as all this snow melting is concerned, well, we'll be lucky if the banks are gone by your birthday. Doesn't matter anyways. The icebreakers should be coming out any day now, and I'll be back to work in... Wait a minute. Why am I explaining this to a 5-year-old? Explain to me why you aren't in school. Mom is sick, said Pete. I stayed home to take care of her. It never ends with her, complained Jim. I don't know how running around outside without a jacket on is helping anyone but yourself catch pneumonia, but it was a real big kid move on your part to try and help out, so I'll let you off the hook. This time. Jim winked cheekily. You still should have went to school, though. I'll go tomorrow, Pete said nonchalantly. What's in the bag? Do you mean the one with McDonald's written on it? Jim asked sarcastically. Sizzler steaks. Sizzler snakes? Asked Pete. Never mind. Jim sighed. Yes, Pete, there is McDonald's in the McDonald's bag. What about my fish-o-filet Happy Meal and toy? Same as every McDonald's Monday, Jim said as he opened the front door for Pete to walk in before him. I was going to pop your food in the old micro when you got home from school, but we might as well all eat together since you're here now. Run in and wake up your mom, and I'll set up the food on the coffee table and put on a movie. Hello, said Jim, answering the telephone. How about green? Said the man on the other end of the phone call. I beg your pardon, said Jim. You said yellow. So I said, how about green? Said the man. I thought perhaps that's how the young people greet each other these days. I stopped trying to understand the changing times long ago, but I still try my damnedest to keep up with them. What? No, said Jim. I didn't say the word yellow. I said hello. Just cooler. Never mind. Who is this? It's Chuck, you uptight son of a bitch. You don't recognize your own father-in-law's voice? Sorry about that, Mr. Hookston. How are you? I'll tell you what. I'd be better if you would respect the rules of the house that I gave you. I don't bring that up to hold it over your head. I was happy to help you kids start your life together. I definitely don't want you to feel like you owe me anything either. It's your house now. However, the least you could do is respect my one and only wish. Do you know what that one rule is, James? Call you Dad? Asked Jim. Call me Dad. That's all I ask, Jimmy boy. Okay, Dad. What can I do for you today? Just calling to check on my princess, that's all. I meant to call sooner, but my pal Sid and I met a couple of ex-Rockettes on the back nine at Boca Lago. I felt a little guilty at first, but I'm a man, damn it, and we all grieve in our own way. Am I right, Jimbo? Anyways, how is May handling the day? Oh, you know, sick and dying of something like any other day, said Jim. Watch it now, son. Any other day I'd laugh at that. I know my daughter can be a lot sometimes, but you have to give her today. It's always been a tough one for her. What's today? It's March 4th, the day my Linny Bear left May and I for the great above. 13 years ago. Oh, shit. Is that today? Asked Jim. It is indeed. I'm sure she's fine, but she's been this way since she was 11. She used to get sick whenever she was scared to do something. Most days you can pay her no mind and she'll feel better in an hour. But on days like today, you have to lean into it. I bust your chops a lot, but I know you're a good husband. You just have to be a better one. For one day. How am I supposed to do that? Asked Jim. Sell it, son. Sell it. Make her believe that you believe her. Has she mentioned going to see Dr. Franco today? Surprisingly, no, said Jim. She hasn't mentioned going to the hospital at all lately. Not even for a biannual checkup. Perfect, said Chuck. Offer to take her. No. Better yet, insist she see a doctor immediately. You'll get brownie points for your concern, and she'll get a little peace of mind hearing a doctor tell her that she's fine. Well, what about the next time she needs attention? Asked Jim. Won't I have to pretend I believe her every time she says the sky is falling? Chuck uttered a sound somewhere between a grunt and a sigh. Yep. That's marriage, my boy. You have to pick your battles. Most of them aren't worth fighting, so you just have to learn to go with it. So, to be a good husband, I have to eat shit for the rest of my life? Gee, can't wait, said Jim. I wish someone would have told me that about marriage before I signed the papers. No offense, of course. May is my world. I mean, no need to explain, and no offense taken, assured Chuck. Let me tell you a little something about marriage with a story about my day-to-day. Will you indulge me, son? Do I have a choice? Thought Jim. Floor is yours, Daddy-O, Jim said with lackluster enthusiasm. Thank you. If you bring your energy up a couple notches when you pretend to be interested in what my daughter has to say, you'll be just fine, said Chuck. You might be half listening right now, but you'll hear what I'm talking about eventually. I didn't want to think about Evelyn today. After Sid and I had a few gin rickeys with those Rockettes, Sid went home to the love of a good and beautiful woman. What did you do? Asked Jim. Chuck paused. I took Vera Ellen and Adele back to my condo for a little Oh! Interrupted Jim. Don't finish that. I get it. I've had a lot of wild liaisons trying to pass the time since Lynn died. I was a hotshot salesman in the early 80s. The women came along too easily to pass up. Easy gets old, Jim. Easy gets old. Evelyn and I had our rough patches, especially while I was on the road a lot. I wasted quite a bit of our time together fighting about things that didn't matter. Still, I'd rather have someone to fight with than no one to talk to. Clears his throat to keep from choking up. Now, go put your game face on, then put my daughter on the phone. Pete was sent next door while Jim took May to the emergency room. Pete's impromptu visit to the Darlington house was met with mixed emotions. I suppose you'll be staying for supper, won't you, Peter? Laurie said with thinly veiled disdain in her voice. Pete sat to the left of Gwendoline at the piano in the dining room, pawing recklessly on the keys while she played the melody to Heart and Soul. He was told to sit still and be patient until Gwendoline's piano lesson was finished. However, Pete was insistent he be able to play piano as well. Mrs. Teitelbaum, Lindinium's most sought-after child piano instructor at the time, refused to continue Gwendoline's lesson, which was pleasing to Gwendoline. She loved playing the piano for fun, but hated practicing scales and proper finger techniques under the tyrannical instruction of Tabitha Teitelbaum. Pete kept playing as he looked back to answer Laurie. Yes, but I got my own dinner. I'm just going to eat it over here. I can't hear a word you're saying over all that racket you're making, said Laurie with her hands covering her ears. I said I have my own food, he shouted as he continued to bang on the piano keys. Will you stop making noise for a moment, please? Asked Laurie. Gwendoline, you as well. You're only encouraging his behavior. But we're playing piano, Mrs. Darlington, explained Pete. Yeah, Mom, we're playing piano, added Gwendoline. Isn't that what it's for? What just happened there was not playing the piano. It was noise. Just noise, Laurie said. I did not pay top dollar for you to learn on a Kimball Viennese edition and play noise with it. Classical piano is not a game. You mean I paid top dollar for a baby grand piano? Mumbled Dr. Darlington from behind his newspaper. What was that from the peanut gallery? Laurie asked her husband. Nothing, dear. Pete said he has his own dinner, he said, chortling awkwardly. I'll bet that's what you said, Phil. As for you, Peter, is my food not good enough for you? Laurie asked, attempting to make a joke. Mom, Gwendoline interjected. No, ma'am, said Pete. Yes, ma'am. I love your food. It doesn't have a toy, though. I want a new moon man. What's a new moon man? Laurie asked. I don't get my Happy Meal toy unless I eat all my food. We were supposed to eat earlier, but didn't, said Pete. What is the world coming to when parents don't have the authority to make their children eat without incentivizing it with a toy or a reward? Laurie said. Dr. Darlington set down his paper, took a puff of his freshly packed tobacco pipe, and blew a giant plume that engulfed the entire room with cherry-flavored smoke. He rose from his favorite chair and walked slowly towards the piano, puffing away as he prepared himself for a monologue. It's not an incentive for kids to eat food. It's conditioning kids to want to eat their food at McDonald's. It's simple, really, he said, leaning on the edge of the piano. They give kids toys in order to trick them into begging their parents to come back to McDonald's all the time. It's the same concept with their little playland. Kids don't like McDonald's. They like what's associated with McDonald's. Toys and fun. Grown-ups don't actually like McDonald's either. They just like that it's cheap and fast. $2.25 for a Big Mac that's already waiting for you when you order is too good of a deal to think about how bad it is for you. Thanks for the lesson in economics, Philip, said Laurie. You should go back to teaching. I don't think you get to hear yourself talk enough anymore. I'm just shocked you even know what a Happy Meal is, Dad. I've never had one, Gwendoline said. You should consider every meal that I provide, and which your mother cooks for you, a happy meal, Dr. Darlington replied. Oh, because of the starving kids in Africa, Dad? Asked Gwendoline. If I don't finish my meatloaf tonight, just call Sally Struthers so she can bring the leftovers with her next time she goes. I hope it's the Moon Man on a jet ski this time. I don't have that one yet, said Pete. I'll go home and get it after me and Wendy are done practicing piano. When Gwendoline and I finish practicing the piano, Laurie said with emphasis on Pete's grammar. You and Wendy are going to practice too? Pete asked, not picking up on Laurie's corrective tone. What? No, never mind. Just go get your fish sandwich. We're going to eat soon, Laurie said. That's silly, Laurie, said Dr. Darlington. We can't make the boy eat cold French fries while we enjoy a hot meal, fresh from the oven, right in front of him. I suppose. Lord knows the boy isn't getting any hot meals next door, agreed Laurie. No, my dad puts it in the microwave, said Pete. It always has smoke coming out of the bun. That means it's hot and it's going to taste good. Reheated fast food hardly counts as a hot meal, Laurie said bluntly. Perhaps it wouldn't have to be microwaved if Jim didn't stop to do DOPE in the driveway. You ought to have a talk with him, Phil. Dope? Gwendoline asked. Shh, said Laurie. Say nope to dope, said Pete. That's very good, Pete. Like the candy guy on the Grapeheads box, right? Asked Dr. Darlington. Pete nodded. Why don't you run next door and get your toy so you'll have it ready to play with after you clean your plate, okay? Dr. Darlington asked. Pete scampered through the kitchen and out the back door, slamming it behind him. What is your problem, Lorraine? Asked Dr. Darlington. He's a child. He needn't know about his father's DRUGS problem. Dad, asked Gwendoline, you realize I have the reading comprehension of a 7th grader, right? Mom didn't spell out the word dope for my benefit. It would benefit you to mind your own business, young lady, Laurie yelled. Reefer madness or not, that child isn't our responsibility. I told you this would happen, Phil. They want to play house when it's fun, then send them over to us when they need a break like we're his grandparents. First, they leave for the evening, then overnight. Soon enough, they'll be vacationing by themselves because they need a break. All the while, I'm running a flippin' daycare. What am I supposed to do when I need a break? May went to the hospital. They didn't go out dancing, Laurie, Dr. Darlington said. It's always something with that one. I bet she's faking it for attention, Laurie said. I still told you we'd be involved. If hindsight were nickels, we'd all be millionaires. Should Pete suffer because his parents haven't quite figured it out yet? Of course not, Philip, said Laurie. Gwendoline's future can suffer instead. Let's let her daydream and play her adolescence away until she grows up to marry a loser she can flounder through life with. Will you not say things like that in front of Gwendoline, please? Dr. Darlington asked. It might do her some good to hear this. Then maybe she won't be so quick to neglect what's best for her every time Peter wants to play make-believe. I'm in the room, you know, said Gwendoline. Will someone please talk to me like I'm sitting here? I've worked too darn hard to keep your life pointed in the right direction. You're liable to veer off course or get lost altogether hanging around with that boy too much, said Laurie. There. Is that what you wanted to hear? May died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 3 months later. In her last season of life, she rarely left her bedroom. Pete was told she simply wasn't feeling well and that Grandpa Chuck had moved in with them to play more. Chuck commandeered the couch as well as the role of May's principal caretaker. Jim got as high as possible and worked as much as possible to keep himself in sustained denial. Another late night at the office, eh, Jimbo? Said Chuck from Jim's favorite spot on the couch. The Jolly Roger set sail for 3 dinner excursions per evening. Each service was timed meticulously from start to finish. However, the bar stayed open on the night's last voyage for as long as the customers were drinking. There was no telling when Jim might get off some nights, so he used his extra time for a few extra pokes of his pinchy at the edge of the driveway. Chuck was waiting up for Jim as if he'd broken curfew. The living room was dark except for the light of the television. Chuck had his feet propped up across the length of the sofa with his back facing the door. He was paging through an old TV guide as if he could read in the dark and listening to the price of limited items drop dramatically, for a short time only, on the QVC Home Shopping Network. Duty calls, Jim shrugged. I thought everyone would be asleep by now. Sorry if my headlights woke you up. I was just doing some reading, Chuck said, slapping the magazine against his hand. In the dark? Jim asked, flipping on the light switch by the front door. They're going to give the Tonight Show to the Doritos guy. Can you believe that? What's the world coming to? Right, Jim said dismissively. Is May sleeping? Is she ever not? A guy can hope. I guess I'll just lay down next to her and watch non-cable TV until I pass out, said Jim. Careful not to wake Pete up. He's in there sleeping too, said Chuck. Great, Jim said, rolling his eyes. He put his jacket back on and started for the front door. Where are you going? Chuck asked, turning toward Jim. Nowhere. Gonna sit by the lake or something. More like, or something, Chuck said, pretending to smoke a joint. I'm not stupid, Cheech. What is it? Too good to hang out with your old man-in-law? Have a seat. Jim walked toward Chuck on the couch. Whoa! What's the ante, Jimmy Durante? Said Chuck. I'm lying down here. Go sit in the chair. What are you trying to neck with me or something, son? Muscle memory, I guess, said Jim. That used to be my favorite spot. Nonsense, said Chuck. Everyone knows the king of the castle sits on the throne. For regular Joes, or should I say regular Jims, like me and you, that throne is his comfy recliner. The sofa is for company, the love seat is for loving, obviously, and the recliner belongs to the man of the house. I'll try and remember that, said Jim, accepting defeat as he sat down in the lazy boy. Did you know the doctors told me I couldn't have children, Jim? Chuck said, apropos of nothing. Is that so? Jim asked, stalling to prepare for a long story. Yes, sir. Lynn and I tried for years to make a baby. Nothing. I was fine with it at first. I was always on the road and working anyhow. When the doc told me I couldn't make a child, it hit me in my manhood. I took pride in providing for my wife, but it felt like that was taken away from me. I built this castle for my queen from practically nothing, but nothing was all the kingdom was worth to her without our princess to inherit it one day. Not to take the piss out of your story, Dad, but doesn't your family own a city or something? That's not really starting with nothing. My family made their fortune in mining, Chuck said. Sure. It may have laid the foundation for this house, but since nothing but continuing the family business would have honored our family name enough in my parents' eyes, I stopped trying. And they cut me off. Fuck them, right? God rest their souls. This ain't half bad for a castle that Curtain Rings built. I see. So how did May come along? Asked Jim. Pure miracle, said Chuck. I've never been one for religion myself. I know a Ponzi scam when I see one. However, I've got to give the man upstairs credit for my baby girl. I was staying at a Howard Johnson in Mankato. There was a home show that weekend, but they might as well have called it the Chuck Panneli experience. Jim, I was on fucking fire that weekend. The star of the show. Not a soul left the River Hills Mall that Saturday without a new set of rings in their bags. Those were the days, huh? Jim asked unenthusiastically. Anyways, said Chuck, Casablanca was on TMC. It was our favorite film when we were young, Evelyn and me. I didn't usually call home over the short weekend trip, but I was on a real sales high and Bogey had me missing my wife. What good is it to be the king of rings without my queen by my side? Naturally, said Jim. I called home to tell Evelyn I loved her, but the phone was off the hook. I don't know why, but my first instincts told me she was having an affair. I drove 90 miles per hour all the way home. Was she cheating? Jim asked, suddenly interested in Chuck's story. Hell no, Chuck said. She didn't even know the phone was off the hook. When I got home, it was only her and Phil having tea. Jim was hesitant to respond. Didn't you think that? I wasn't thinking at all, son. Not about what was important. I'm just lucky that my Lenny Bear was turned on by my jealousy that night. We got it on, and 9 months later, I was a daddy. I gave up life on the road and the glamour of selling rings for the insurance game so I could stay close to what was most important. I spent every second I could with Evelyn after I found out she was dying. After she passed, and even to this day, I regret all the time I missed before that. Jim, all I'm saying is that you might want to cherish what you have while you have it. Pete boarded the bus to ride home on his last day of school with his jacket tied around his waist, a backpack full of swag he'd ordered from the Scholastic Book Fair, and a head full of anticipation and excitement for summer. Good afternoon, cadet, Davy said, saluting Pete as he daydreamed his way up the bus stairs. Or should I say, Ensign Panneli? Pete stopped abruptly just before the last stair to salute Davy, nearly causing the children lined up behind him to stumble forward like dominoes. "Afternoon, Admiral Davy," Pete said, then thought for a moment. "What's that?"
Well, kindergarten is over for you, so you're not a cadet anymore. You've earned a promotion in the ranks," said Davy. "Congratulations. First grade is the big leagues."
"Thanks," said Pete. "Will I be an admiral like you when I get to second grade?"
"It's Admiral, Ensign," Davy said. "You're going to need a lot more stripes to rise to my ranks. Go find your seat in the meantime. You're holding up the line again."
The innocuously curious nature of Pete's daily line of questions for Davy often came to the chagrin of his meticulous route schedule. He found himself getting sucked into Pete's imaginative riffs and banter increasingly as the school year progressed. Davy would try to be stern with Pete at times, but Pete thought it was all a part of the Navy game they played together. "Aye, aye, Admiral Ensign," Pete said, saluting.
"No, Never mind, Pete. Go sit down, please."
Pete walked to his usual seat next to Gwendoline in the back of the bus. "What did you get from the book fair, Wendy?" Pete asked as he took his seat. "The book fair's for babies. I don't get to pick which books I want to read over the summer." "What's fair about that?" Wendy said morosely. "I don't know, but I got a bunch of stuff," said Pete. "Re-erasers, this giant pencil, a slap bracelet, and I would have got the race car poster, but my dad didn't have any birthday money left." "Did you get any books from the book fair, Peter?" "Duh," said Pete. "Those aren't for me, though. They're for my mom. She never feels good anymore, but she's probably tired of reading me the same old books. These'll help." Gwendoline was aware of May's prognosis, but was instructed not to tell Pete. "That's nice of you, Peter. What books did you get for your mom?" "Goodnight Moon and Love You Forever. I can't wait to show her." Pete's glee plummeted as he entered a room full of somber faces. May died that morning, shortly after Pete left for school. Jim was sitting on the floor with his knees bent and his face resting in his palms. Chuck stood staring out the window. Dr. Darlington was sitting at the dining room table with Laurie, shaking his head solemnly while he held back tears and Laurie stroked his tightly clenched fist to comfort him. "What's the matter?" Pete asked with apprehension. "Why is everyone so sad?" "Pete, honey, come over here," Laurie said as everyone in the room looked to someone else to answer him. Laurie released her grasp of Dr. Darlington and held her arms out towards Pete. As he walked towards her, scared and confused, Laurie's eyes began to well up, already feeling the weight of Pete's impending grief. Before a tear could fall, she swooped Pete into her embrace from her chair. Still struggling to formulate the right words, all Laurie could do was breathe him in deeply and hug him with all of her might. She swayed from left to right, stroking his hair with a soft downward motion. Pete began to weep, but he wasn't sure why. "Please tell me why you're crying, Mrs. Darlington. It's making me cry." Jim arose from his crouched position on the living room floor with tears of hysteria, crying so hard he struggled to breathe and speak at the same time. May's gone. Your mom is gone, Pete." "Gone? Where'd she go? She's coming back, right?" Pete said, even more frightened and confused. Jim rolled over to a fetal position and continued sobbing. Laurie braced Pete by the shoulders. "Your mother... well, she passed away, Peter. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. She was very, very sick, honey." "No, she wasn't," Pete said angrily. "She was just tired all the time. Did you really check good? She might still be sleeping." Pete broke loose from Laurie's grip and ran to the master bedroom to see for himself. The coroners had left hours ago, but her bed was still unmade, her pillow still creased from where her head lay. Pete dropped to the floor in an inconsolable fit, rolling around and bellowing for "Mommy!" and screaming, "It's not fair!" Jim, Laurie, and Dr. Darlington approached Pete as a unit to console him, but his little arms and legs were flailing too wildly. "I know it's not fair, buddy. We're all sad, but at least we can all be sad together," Jim said, trying to comfort Pete. "No! All of your mommies didn't die! I want my Wendy!" Pete shouted as he sprang up, wiggled through the legs of the adults, and ran out the back door. The three adults stood silently, unsure if they should chase after Pete or not. Laurie was the first to speak. I hate it when he calls her Wendy. The end. Our theme song, Grown Man, was written and recorded by Adam Herman and the Slamming Doors.
I'm nothing but a child, wearing a grown man's clothes.
Special thank you to Chief Editor Robert Peach. Daddy's Home was recorded in Enchanted Santa Fe at the Pelipan Portal Studios. The series Pete and Gwendoline Grew Up was created by J.S. Thompson. Pete and Gwendoline will return in Season 2. Namaste, bitches.